Good evening, everybody. I'm Stu Hardy, Chairman of the Tiverton Planning Board, and welcome on this horrible evening to the April 2nd, 2024 regular monthly meeting of the Tiverton Planning Board. As always, we will start with a roll call. Mr. Shriver.
Here.
Mr. Gerlach is not here yet, but he's expected later. Ms. Gomes?
Present.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Eva?
Present.
Ms. Hilton?
Present.
Ms. Lopes?
Present.
And the first item on our agenda is a concept plan review for a proposed development at 331 Main Road. And I'd like to invite John Garrahy, the attorney for the project, and Jeffrey Likens, the architect for the proposed project, to come up to the table and give us, this is the building, everybody knows this building at 331. It's the Little White Chapel, a former Baptist chapel, built in the 1880s, way up in North Tiverton, very, very near Famous Pizza on that side of the road. And the proposal is to do a mixed-use development with I believe, commercial on the first level and then 4 small apartments on the second level. So if you could walk us through what you're trying to do. And also, we need to hear what you need with respect to zoning relief. You're looking for a variance.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, John Garrahy on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Jeffrey Likens is here with me, who is the architect for the project. This is conceptual plan review. No action is required by you. It's so that we could present it to you, show what we're offering, the relief that we need from the zoning board, a couple of new terms under the new zoning regulations, adaptive reuse, unified development. Both of those qualify. We think this is a good project, totally appropriate for this area, but doesn't just fit neatly. And also because it's multifamily, your regulations provide for land development review under that project. So, and I think we do need a modification under your new adaptive reuse program, and I'll be happy to go through the relief. Let me just do that now, and then Mr. Likens can give an overview of the project. It's a project of 1 commercial unit and 4 residential units in the old church building. There is a slight addition to the building for a new stairway for fire safety purposes, and because that's within the side yard, we need a dimensional variance, normally by the zoning board, but under unified development, you have the right and the ability to grant that, and we would apply for that under the unified development program. We also, under your regulations, you require 11 spaces, I believe. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And
when I go into it, I'll
yes,
I'll
okay.
Because it might be up to discussion.
Okay. So I think Jeff is going to add another space, found another parking space, so we may or may not need parking, but essentially, that's the relief. We also need a modification under your adaptive reuse program because more than 50% of the floor area is devoted to residential use, and however, 70% is devoted to residential use. And under your adaptive reuse, if more than 50% is devoted to residential use, we need a modification under that program. So dimensional variance, perhaps for parking, dimensional variance for the side yard. Now, the size of the lot is 9,234 square feet. And under the old zoning regulations, you would have needed a variance for the lot size because we don't meet the 60,000, which would have been required. But under the new state regulations, as long as the use is permitted, you do not need a variance for because of the lot size. So although that was required prior to January 1st, it is no longer required. So it's kind of a very relatively small, compact project, but a lot of lifting, moving parts from a regulation point of view. So Jeff, if you want to explain the project.
Sure. So you all know the church, we're raising the roof about half a story up to gain another story, because there's 2 apartments on each story above the commercial space. The side yard requirement we need for the stair that John mentioned, we're not encroaching as much into the side yard as the building already does, but the building does encroach in the side yard, and this stairway does as well. It's only a matter of inches. We're a few inches less into the side yard than one of the bump outs on the existing building is, but we do need that side yard relief. On parking, so on the drawings you all have, I had for the first floor, I think I had a 1,200 something square foot number. I was looking at this again recently since I did those drawings. And if you look at the first floor, because it's partially underground, the foundation walls on this old church, the rubble stone walls, they're like almost 1.5 feet thick. And then I have to add a wall to that to meet energy code for insulation. So if I do what's left on the inside, I'm down to 999 square feet. So as it pertains to parking, at 999, divide by the 300, and I get a required 3.33 spaces for the commercial space. I don't know if I'm allowed to round down. If I'm allowed to round down, then that would be 3, and then you need 2 spaces for each residential, so that'd be 8. So I guess that brings us to 11. So now I think I'm still 1 short, because I got 9, 10. No, I was able to fit 1 more space in. I can pass around the drawing.
How many parking spaces do you have then, Mr. Likens? I'm sorry.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, I have 11, so if you want to pass that around. Oops. There you go.
11.
I was able to get a compact space in on the bottom right there, bringing me up to 11. So that depends on the interpretation. I'm not confident my interpretation is correct, but if we, like I say, if I use the interior usable space and we round down from 3.33 to 3, that gives us 11, and I can fit 11 on the site. So if those numbers are acceptable, then we don't need parking relief.
If you have to round up,
Then we need, then we're short of space, right. So that's up to how you look at
You
it.
mentioned a compact space.
Yes,
Are you talking about a compact,
Car.
smaller than, a compact car, not a normal sized car?
right. So my last space, instead of being 9 feet wide, is 8 feet wide. It's still the full depth, because it lines up with the other one, so I have the depth, but I just made it
You would
foot.
need relief. You would need relief.
Okay, so the compact doesn't count, or I'm not sure?
It shouldn't, that's up to the building official, I would say,
Oh, I see.
or the board, actually.
Okay, well, we should ask for relief then.
Yeah.
We have
Otherwise, we'll
space.
go there and we come back, maybe. So that sounds like we still need relief maybe for 1 parking space. And we need the side yard setback, and then according to the new state law, maybe we do not need the relief for the area anymore that I had indicated we did need relief for. The buildings remaining, other than I'm adding a staircase to the, I don't know if you can see this clear from there, but on your site plan, on the back left, that's where I'm adding a staircase. And then up here, there was already a structure here that has a staircase in it, but I just had to make it a little bit larger, like a foot, to make it meet regulations, because the old stairs didn't meet current standards for staircases for rise and run and the right size landings.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah, no problem.
What's the drawing number on that, so we can look at
Oh,
all.
the C1.0. So it should be probably the first page, unless the survey's on top.
It's about 6th page.
Oh, okay.
The height will still be within the height requirements for the town?
Yes, yeah. We're just going up like about 4 or 5 feet higher than it already is. Right. And in the packet, and you don't have to go through it right now, but if you wish to, an hour later, so there is a survey. We did have engineering for the septic system is done and complete and approved. Stormwater retention has been done. Those plans are in here. I have a landscape architect signed and sealed plan for the landscape plan. And there is a lighting plan in here that shows the foot candles hitting the ground, so what lighting we were dispersing, and nothing's leaving, no light is leaving the site. It's staying all within the site, so no pollution to other properties. Other than that, it's, I think, pretty straightforward. Like I say, it's 2 apartments per floor. They're 2-bedroom, no, one-bedroom apartments on each. So they are modest apartments. And then we have that retail space on the ground floor.
So I have one suggestion when you come back. Bring your plans and your graphic representation of the design of the apartments, as well as the facade of the building, what the general public would see from Main Road, for example. Bring all of that on a computer so that we can put you up on the screen, because our meetings are televised.
Oh, okay.
And I want our television audience to have the benefit of seeing everything that we can see.
Right. Okay, yeah, no problem.
So that's good, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if you want me to summarize, I'll do the relief again if you'd like. Is that helpful to you?
No, I think we all understand the relief, but Mr. Garahy, you made several references to an adoptive reuse program. I love adoptive reuse, and I wish we had a program, but we don't.
We do. You approved it last fall.
We did?
We did. You had to. The state made you. Adaptive reuse is now required by the general laws.
Oh, okay, I guess we did it.
Article 4, Section 21.
It slipped right through without me even noticing.
No, you were very supportive of it at the time.
No, that's terrific.
So we do need relief for modification, which is allowed under that, because we have more than 50% residential.
Yes.
Correct.
That's right. So it's a modification under section 1.1B of that order.
Okay, and just a point of clarification, because I couldn't quite figure this out when I was going through the plans. We're talking about a 3-story, correct? So we're talking
Basically,
about,
from the
we're
road-
talking about two residential units on the second floor and 2 residential units on the third floor.
Right.
So there are 3 floors. In the first floor, it will be commercial of some kind.
Right.
Okay.
And from the street view, you don't see the ground floor. So it only appears as 2 stories from the street level, because it slopes dramatically down, so when you get down to the
Yes.
back, you're down
Yes,
at
that's
that
correct.
third level.
It does. It slopes dramatically.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with this project, and I don't have a problem with the relief that you're seeking personally, but let me ask my colleagues if they have any comments or any feedback that they'd like to give you.
Yeah, we'd love to know if there's any concerns.
I am concerned about maintaining the historic character of the facade. It is an important historical resource in North Tiverton. We're trying to maintain as much of that as we can. So I'd like to ask my colleagues if they have any comments or any feedback, and then I think one member of the audience has something to say. Does anybody? Okay, we have, I think I saw Dick's hand go up before Bill.
How about lot coverage? How are you doing? Have you put in enough grass there to,
So our coverage,
of your pervious and impervious surfaces?
right, building coverage is quite small, it's 17.4%. Pavement and structure together are 72.9%. So, and it's actually less than it was before. On the site plan, I've carved out every area I could, like around the parking spaces, to create some more green space.
Now, you'll be cutting off that access through to 333 behind.
Behind, right, correct.
Where people are parking now
Right.
and that access will.
And they
all be
know
cut
that,
off.
yeah.
And the same curb cut coming in?
Same curb cut coming in, yes.
So let me address, Mr. Harding, let me address the lot coverage, because they're doing adaptive reuse, as long as they're not expanding the footprint, lot coverage will not be an issue.
And we are reducing it a little bit,
Other
in
than the fire.
terms of pervious.
Yeah.
I saw one, there was a change of the relief on one side. Either you added or subtracted on one side of the building.
Yeah, so on the one side where I had to add a staircase, if you're facing the building, it'd be on the right. Yeah, at the back.
Okay.
Yeah, I added a staircase. It doesn't protrude as much as the building already does, but only by inches. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Dick, and Bill?
Yeah, and apologies if this was already covered. I apologize for being late, and we may be seeing it the next time you come.
Yeah.
And you may have answered my question by
It's okay.
talking about the slope here, but as I looked at those initial sort of architectural renderings and then cross-compared that with our form-based code design guidelines for neighborhood business, it struck me that the street-facing facade was sort of let me put it another way, the access to the commercial retail space is on the side
Yes.
as opposed to the front. It looks pretty stark in the front from the street view. That was my only sort of thing. I don't know how you compensate for that, given the sort of slope, the topography.
Yeah, yeah.
It seems a slightly inconsistent with the design guidelines for neighborhood business, but I know we're at the early stages here.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree. One, I can look at it, and two, but it's also partially due to the unique characteristic of this site and the way the grade slopes so dramatically.
Sure, yeah.
I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Okay, does any member of the audience?
I have
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the site plan is supposed to be signed by a professional engineer. This one is supposedly signed by you, Mr. Likens.
Yep. Well, there is a,
That's why I'm a little, I only got these plans like Thursday.
uh-huh,
I
okay,
apologize for being not up to speed.
okay.
Perhaps, I mean, the board.
There's a survey
might
as
entertain-
well. There is a separate survey stamped.
There's three other engineering drawings in the set. There's a survey signed and sealed by a land surveyor, and then there's two more
Are
surveys
they,
by the septic design and the stormwater engineer. So I don't know if that helps, but there's three different engineers signed site plans.
I'm familiar with Westwood, and perhaps the board should entertain a site plan. The city.
I don't understand that last statement.
Perhaps the board should entertain, it's up to the board, a site walk. So that
Oh.
we can, see
Mm-hmm.
what we have, but that's up to the board and the chair.
No, that might be a good idea, if there's sufficient interest,
Yeah, you can let us know.
right? I think Sue Anderson, who is the chair of the Tiverton Historic Preservation Advisory Board, would like to ask, make a comment or ask a question. She chairs the historic board here and
Okay.
the official historic board for the town of Tiverton.
Thank you.
Could you speak into the mic? Thank you.
About a year ago, I had sent a letter to the owner. Our board had sent a letter to the owner regarding the dimensional variance that he was asking from the zoning commission.
Yes.
And in there, and I think I had copied the planning board at the same time. I just want to go over the history of this, because this is a very important building, as he said, in North Tiverton. It was erected in 1867, not 1880s. But it was 1867. And it was dedicated in 1868, and it was known as Benefit Hall, and was used as a meeting place by the Quakers and the YMCA. In 1885, the pastor of the Baptist Temple in Fall River moved the building across the street to where it is now. That's maybe where you got the 1880s. Yeah, but it was
There's
built in
actually a date on the
1867.
facade of the building.
Yeah, the date is in the gable. It's a decorated gable. It says Temple Chapel, 1867. So my concern is that wooden structure, the house to the south of it has been restored beautifully with clapboard and everything. This is right next door, and the vinyl siding that you have and the stacked stone just does not fit. It's not historically, it just is not historically accurate to this
Okay.
particular project. The other thing that I would love to have you preserve, I know you're going to raise it another half a story.
Yeah.
That Gothic gable with the decorative facade that says Temple Chapel, 1867,
Yeah.
that really should be preserved, because that is part of the historic character, it's the part of the historic neighborhood,
Gotcha. Yeah.
and that's the building that it is.
Okay.
And as,
think
if you
that's
can.
doable.
Yeah, and if you could use, like, I know you're doing away with the stained glass windows, they're not, but the Gothic architecture is kind of cool for
It
that
is,
building.
that's true, yeah.
And so if you could maybe work with them, or I know you have just regular 6/6
Yeah, yeah.
double hung, which would be fine in a regular building, but this is a chapel-type building. Even if you could just, I mean, I think it's kind of cool to have, if I was a resident, I'd kind of like to have some kind of a unique structure in,
Sure.
for the windows, thinking that. And if you can deal with like a maintenance-free, like, I know New Old House, this old house, they use like,
Hardy board?
not Trex, but yeah, but something that looks wood.
Yeah, more
rather
dimensional.
than a vinyl. Because, yeah, it just, vinyl siding is just not going to cut it, especially with right next to that building that's to the south. The house is next to the south. So those are my
Good
comments.
comments. Yeah, thank you.
To fit in with the character. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I would associate my views with those of Ms. Anderson.
Okay.
I hope you can do something.
Yeah, I think we can do something.
And we look forward to working with you. We're flexible, of course.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much.
And I'd like to entertain a motion to take our agenda out of order because I see Mr. Rogers and also Dan Murphy, the fire marshal. They're both here because they're interested in an agenda item, and that would be 2E, Planning Board Checklist Revision. So I would entertain a motion to move 2E to replace 2A. I'll do that for you. Okay, so we have a motion from Chris. Do we have a second? Second. And I think I heard VA say second. And any further discussion? Hearing none. All of those in favor? It looks unanimous. So I would like to, Dan and Rick, if you'd like to come up, you can, but I'm warning you, this is going to go very fast, and we're going to agree to everything you want. I think we're going to do that. Let me just see. So we all received an email from Ashley, maybe 2 weeks ago, and she called our attention to the fact that there is a checklist item for minor subdivision master plan checklist. It's items 49 and 50. And also checklist items for major land development master plan checklist, items 38 and 39. They are requesting letters from Rick as the director of DPW to address issues of stormwater runoff and the condition of roads, the status of roads. And they are requesting a letter from the fire department and from the fire marshal, Dan Murphy, to address the issue of water for fire suppression. And these letters are requested so early in the application process that very often it's inconvenient. And it would be easier to push these letters back into the preliminary plan stage of site plan review when a lot more engineering has been done and a lot more is known. And it would be easier for Dan and Rick to do the letters. So I'm prepared to make a motion to grant Ashley, as our interim part-time planner and AO, the discretion of delay, of pushing these letters back to a later stage in the review and not having to deal with them at master plan level or at the very first stage of review, whatever that happens to be. And giving her the discretion to put these, to request this information at a later stage. So would that make you happy?
So, so.
That's what we've been asked for.
No, so for me, as the fire marshal, nothing is inconvenient. I will answer whatever I can possibly do. This came about because there's two duplexes?
I think so.
Two duplexes that are being put on water supply. It's North Tiverton water, but they needed a recommendation from me on if there's adequate water. I can't give that because it's on public water supply, and North Tiverton already provided a letter stating that there was water. So I just recommended follow with the North Tiverton, but they want me, or your board wants me to say there's enough of water. That's not my purview as the water, that is the water department's purview. If it's a non-hydrogen district, we already have that cistern requirement in, but for somebody who's building on the town's water, so I should say North Tiverton or Stonebridge's water supply, I can't tell you if they have enough of water, because I don't know the pressures of the hydrants, and if the hydrants don't even meet the requirement, then what do we do? I mean, there's some parts where, was that Tiverton Heights off of Fish Road? That's a different thing, they're running water mains, it's a massive subdivision, that's a different ballgame, we've already addressed that in front of you before. But to do small subdivisions like the one that we're doing, I can't comment on that. I did comment, but I just said, please follow what the North Tiverton Fire District letter stated. And I guess that doesn't suffice.
Well, what Ashley has requested is not to simply waive the checklist item altogether,
yeah.
but to ask you to provide that information at a later stage in the site plan
Right.
review.
For me, what I'm saying is, even if you were to push that off for two duplexes, whether it's today or whether it's 6 months from now, I still can't answer that question.
But you
Because-
would do a hydrant flow test.
I do not do hydrant flow tests. Absolutely not. That's not my job. That is not even within my purview.
Okay, but the fire department does.
I am the fire department, and we do not do hydrant flow tests.
You don't?
We do not. It is not our purview. That is not our requirement.
Okay, I
That's- so
thought
that's what I'm
you were,
saying.
I had the impression that the
No.
NFPA required you to do that.
Not us. So, that Tiverton Heights project, they did it they had an engineer come in, they did it by computer, and then as you clearly know, we had a couple hydrants that failed, they moved them. Once all those water lines go in, they have an engineer come in, and there's gonna be actual flow tests for that project. And if those actual, flow tests fail, then they have to put in pump stations. It's not on the town's dime, not on my dime. I don't perform the tests, their engineer does. No member of the Tiverton Fire Department does any hydrant flows. And has never done it in 28 years since I've been on the job.
Do you require proof from these projects that they have
It all
adequate?
depends on the project. So for all intents, so let's say we did a hydrant flow test for this project, and it fails. They're only tying a domestic water line in to feed those two houses. They're not doing anything else. They're not running any water mains. It's just a domestic line. And if those hydrants on that street fail, then what do I do? Exactly. There's nothing, what do? Do I tell the North Tiverton Fire District they've got to put in pumps? Now, we're opening up a can of worms that nobody has an answer to, and neither do I. But they're only tying domestic lines in to feed those two houses. They're not putting in major water lines. So I cannot answer that question, whether it's today, last week, or 6 months from now. I can only say, North Tiverton Fire District, for these two houses or these two duplexes, said, there's enough of water, I have to go by that. And that's what kind of put us in the little quagmire that we're in right now.
Okay. But we haven't been asked to waive the requirement for a letter.
Ashley's memorandum says it would be helpful to have a blanket waiver only to use when it is determined to be appropriate to allow these checklist items to be provided as a condition of final approval.
So are you recommending that I make a motion? I'm a little uncomfortable about this, frankly. I'm thinking that we need to have a discussion among ourselves about fire suppression. We have water issues. We have really serious water issues in the town of Tiverton right now. I know because I've been talking to the town administrator who is heading up a review of the situation both in the North Tiverton Fire District and in the Stonebridge Fire District. We need to know that water can be delivered to a proposed development in sufficient volume and pressure without affecting the rest of the system, and in sufficient volume and pressure to deal with fire suppression issues as well as just domestic water need. And we're having trouble getting that information.
Let me clarify that. I think all Ashley is asking about is the checklist items.
Yes.
So she can certify an application as complete. It's not that you're waiving the requirement during your review. It's just for the checklist, again, to determine the application complete so it can proceed to the next stage.
You know, I have no problem with that.
Completeness.
And I think that's all she's asking for.
Maybe we should wait for her to.
I know that's all she's asking for, so she can issue a certificate of completeness. That's all she wants to be able to do.
Okay, that's fine. I think that's fine. Does anybody have any further comment? By the way, our checklists are part of our subdivision regulations, and we are supposed to be reviewing our subdivision regulations. We actually have Ashley's firm has actually been hired and has a contract to be doing that, so we'll be working with Ashley's firm on that at a certain point in time. And then, of course, we will be reviewing all of the checklists at the same time, doing it in a holistic manner so that we have everything together, and just asking for that information that we really need to make a good, wise, well-informed decision about projects. And fire suppression and water availability is a huge issue in the town of Tiverton right now. But I'm prepared to make a motion, and if I get a second.
So I know you keep saying that there's a water issue. That's still not gonna be addressed by us as the fire department. That can only be addressed by the two water departments.
Right.
So
Oh, exactly.
no matter what,
Exactly.
That can all be explained during the hearings though, Captain, and then they can waive the requirement at
Yeah.
that point.
Yep,
so.
yep. So I will make a
I have a
motion.
motion for you if you want to.
One quick comment, but I can wait till after you get the motion.
Well, let me make the motion, and if I get a second, then we'll have a discussion. And then you can, Dick, you can make a comment. Do you have some text that you'd like to give me?
Do you want to just say it?
Sure, why don't you just say my motion, and I'll.
I would suggest, Mr. Hardy, as your motion,
And I will associate myself with your comments.
that the planning board waive from the minor subdivision checklist for preliminary plan approval, checklist items 49 and 50, but only as to determination of completeness.
And checklist items 38 and 39.
49, 50
There are 4 checklist items that are on the agenda, that are listed on the agenda.
They didn't make a memo?
Yeah, so it's the major,
Then yes, Mr. Hardy, correct.
Okay.
the major land development master plan as well.
Right, so we have two checklists and 2 letters per each checklist. So, with that revision, I would make that motion. And did you get enough of that for the minutes? And do I have a second to my motion? Chris has seconded the motion. Now, discussion, and I think Dick had some comments?
Yeah, for the achievement. What we've been getting from the water department looks okay. There's no scientific anything behind it. There's no water models.
Right.
There's no way for us.
So that's where I was saying, like, for this, and it came about because of these two duplexes.
Yeah.
They're only tying in domestic water lines. And that's where, when I wrote my letter, I said, I think it was Ed gave me the North Tiverton Fire District's letter, and I said, well, follow with the North Tiverton Fire, because it's only 2 duplexes that are tying in domestic. On a different note, when we did Tiverton Heights project, major water lines, major project, they had to do calculations, and I think we came in front of you, they failed. We moved some hydrants, and that's where they have to now do an actual flow test once the lines come in. And if that fails, because now, of course, the model's gonna be different than actual, and if the actual fails, now it's on the subdivision contractor to now fix their water problem, and not us as a town, and not North Tiverton. It's gonna, so they would have to put in pumps, because that's a different project where they're putting in massive water lines and which is totally different than anybody that, South Tiverton, that, is it, any more than 3 have to put cisterns in. So there's a bunch of little issues that we have to worry about.
That'd be no different than a tanker pulling up responding to a fire. When you ask, you need another tanker? No, looks okay.
So that's why, so in our requirement, anything more than 3 is required, a cistern or an alternate. As a matter of fact, the Hinter's Way is putting
sure.
in residential, it's gonna be, our first house with residential sprinklers is on Hinter's Way. Because the developer decided to go that route,
Yes, right.
so.
Well, we have a motion, we have a second, we're having a discussion now. Anybody else like to make a comment? If not, then I guess we're prepared to move on for a vote. So all of those in favor of the motion? I believe it's unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, have a good night.
So now we can go back to our regular agenda, and this is the big ticket item coming up next, which is the special use permits and the changes that we have been making in the use table. And I'd like to start out, I guess you're going to be moving, and I probably should move as well. Tricia, would you like to move directly to conservation development and the map before we do this?
That might be a good idea, then we don't have to stop if we're not
Okay.
finished with those.
Okay, I would request a motion to move the agenda out of order again. And this is because of a conversation that Tricia has had with the president of the town council and the town administrator, to bring up agenda item 2C and 2B. 2B and 2C, to bring those up as our next items, instead of what used to be 2A. So I would make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Bill Gerlach. Any further discussion? Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, those in favor? So Tricia, so you would be next now with the map.
We're gonna do the map, okay.
And I didn't bring the hard copy map I have because of the rain and because I put it on I clipped it onto a particle board, and I was afraid that the rain would destroy the particle board.
I have the map here. So,
Okay. Yes.
Share.
While I'm getting this set up, as background, Stu and I should probably just give the planning board a little bit of an overview about what this is about. So, might have to
Hold on, Trish, that's not on here.
plug to turn this on. So, most, I think everybody on the planning board is pretty familiar with the fact that there's currently a moratorium on subdivisions. So, and that goes until the end of June. And while that was going on, the idea, I don't know if this is on.
Yeah, it's on. I can see the light up there.
Oh, here we go. We might have to nip this.
I'm going to get out of the way because I'll be in the way, I think, of your screen.
Yeah, you did most, but I had the bigger lights that will.
So while this was going on, there's been an effort with Stu, myself, Lorraine Joubert from the University of Rhode Island's NEMO program, who some of you may know because she's worked with Tiverton quite a bit in the past, to follow up on something that's in our comprehensive plan, which was really to look at the potential density that we would have at build-out and whether or not we actually have the infrastructure to support that. And that's, public water, sewer, it's also though groundwater and septic systems. And we've known for a long time, and we've been warned for a long time by various experts who have been here, that, at full build-out, we are at risk of not having enough infrastructure to be able to support all of it. And we're already starting to see potentially with the public water where we're getting a little close. So there is a specific action item in our community comprehensive plan to review the densities, the zoning densities in all of our zones and determine whether or not, we are potentially allowing development beyond what we can actually support. This is a page from the community comprehensive plan. I know it's a little bit hard to read, but, the total potential build out here was 3,100 new units. That is the most conservative estimate that you can imagine. And the real number is considerably higher. We've got about 7,500 housing units now. This was done based on single-family units only, so it doesn't take into account any of the zones or any of the projects that are multifamily. It certainly doesn't consider things like Tiverton Heights with their 275 units. This is only single-family, so it doesn't count any multifamily. The other thing about this is that when they do this build-out, and it's not perfect, they look only at completely vacant lots. So any lot that is developed that's potentially subdividable in the future isn't included in this. And you only have to look around in Tiverton to know how many large parcel lots there are, and especially farm properties that have, none of them were counted in this. So this was only looking at completely vacant parcels that could be subdivided. The estimates are maybe that this is off by as much as 50%, that you're really talking about, somewhere closer to another 6,000 units. So, that's a lot of development. Yeah. Now, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about in terms of constraints, and I'm trying to get through this as quickly as I can. If you have questions for Stu or for me, please feel free to ask.
Tricia, I have a question of those single-family units. Is that assuming that they are on a certain amount of acreage, like an acre and a half minimum?
It's assuming that they are on the amount of land that was it's the density for that zone, hang on a
Okay.
second, let me go back to this and see if I have it. Oh, did I just close that? I think I did. On that chart, it said each zone, R30, R40, R60, so the math was done based on, you know, vacant parcels in that zone divided by that. So, this is an interesting map here, which has the constraints to development. So essentially, what you're looking at, and let me open up the legend here, are areas of town where there are considered to be significant constraints to development. If we didn't have constraints to development, you'd see a lot of green or the very pale yellow that you see in the northeast corner in North Tiverton, and there's a little bit of pale yellow over by the border, you know, with Westport. Pale yellow and pale green are good for development. Everything that's dark yellow, dark pink, red is not so good. So the dark red are hydric soils, meaning these are soil types that are essentially wetlands, which are really terrible for, you know, septic systems. Then you've got what are known as subaqueous soils, which have severe constraints. Those are high water table soils. The bright yellow is bedrock or slope in excess of 15%, and then you've got water bodies. We have some of the worst soils in the state. Little Compton and Jamestown are right there with us, but we have some of the worst soils in the state for septic systems. That's just a fact of life, because it's wet. It's very wet. There's a lot of bedrock. There's a lot of slope and a lot of seasonal high water. If you have a well and you drink well water, you know that maybe as much as 50% of the water in your well comes from septic leaching, which sounds horrifying, except that it's a system that works, provided there's enough dry land to be able to filter the septic leachate before it gets into the groundwater and back into your well. That's one of the really important things about not overdeveloping, because there are issues of water quantity and issues of water quality. In terms of quantity, North Tiverton Fire District has its certain set of ability to deliver water, which we're working on determining that exact amount, the same with Stonebridge. There's a limited amount of sewer, public sewer in Tiverton. There'll be more coming eventually, but it's a multi-decade project geared primarily towards, you know, the northwest corner of Tiverton. The rest of the town relies on septic systems. We don't have an underground aquifer, we have fractured bedrock, that's it. Unlike some communities who have wells that are going down into big aquifers, that's not what we have. We just have these fractures in the bedrock. And there's a limit to that water, it's not an unlimited supply. When you couple that with the constraints to development, and you, to start with, don't have an unlimited supply of water, if you overdevelop and you put too much septic into that ground, then you have a water quality problem too. So what we're really trying to do is to make sure that we do not develop beyond our capacity, to make sure that all of town, whether it's with public water or with well water, has enough potable water to drink and to live and to survive, and that we don't find ourselves in a position where we have large sections of town that either don't have enough water to drink, their wells don't recharge, their wells are dry in August, or you know, we've got people who are drinking bottled water, or you know, putting in very expensive, you know, ultraviolet light systems to try and make sure they have enough potable water. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the driving force behind what we've been working on. So I'm going to take this off and show you another map, which is the existing zoning map. So this is the zoning map that we have today in Tiverton. And as you can see, we've got 4 primary residential zones. In the north part of Tiverton, the northwest part of Tiverton, we have the R30 zone. Kind of in the Stonebridge area is R40. R60 kind of wraps around Stafford Pond, although there's a little piece of it that's on the north side of Sousa Road. And then finally in South Tiverton, it's R80. But there are portions already that are R120. So that shaded portion around Stafford Pond, the primary part of the Stafford Pond watershed, is in fact already R20. And so is the primary portion of the Nonquit watershed, which is basically about 2,000 feet around that pond, is already at R20.
You mean R120?
I'm sorry, R120. Did I say R20?
Yeah.
You said 120 to start, and then
120. Thank you. All right. So, based on what we know about the conditions of the ground here, and on work that's been done at URI, at work that's been done at DEM, and what some other similar communities who have constraints not even as significant as ours, we are proposing a new zoning map. And I'm gonna have to make this a little smaller so we can see the whole thing, but. Let's try and make this 1%. Well, I'm not sure. This is a PDF file.
Move
because-
towards the other side of your, I had this happen to me at your.
yeah, go left side, not right side.
Yeah, because you're.
It's like you're doing a right click.
Right click, yeah. That happened to me the other day.
There you go.
Hmm.
Well, what I'm trying to do is shrink this.
Use the negative sign. Can you click on the next?
I don't think it will go any smaller than 25%,
It might not
because
be,
she had
yeah.
15 and it automatically went to 25.
Say that again? I'm not a Windows person.
I don't think it's going to go smaller than 25. The negative is
Sort of grayed out.
Might not
Right.
go. Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that's as far as you can go.
Okay, so we are proposing, and I'll have to show this to you in pieces. We are proposing to show a new zoning map that would essentially take just about all of what was R60, a portion in the center area of R40, and all of R80 and convert it to R120. So everything that you see in the pale purple would become R120. So we would go to 3-acre zoning for all of those sections of town.
So 120,000 square feet is a little under 3 acres, right? Because an acre is what, 42,000 square? 44.
A little bit under, but.
A little bit under. And about a year ago, Tricia and I attended a webinar hosted by Lorraine Joubert of University of Rhode Island Cooperative Extension Service, and she chairs a program that works with municipal officials on non-point source pollution issues. And also Scott Millar, some of you may remember when Scott was at RIDEM, and more recently he's been at GrowSmart. That webinar concluded that you need at least 3 acres in an area like so many parts of Tiverton that have no piped water and have no sewer. So that number is, I think the 120 number is the bare minimum.
And we're not off the mark. I mean, there are a number of other communities Charlestown, Exeter. There are a number of other communities that have 3-acre or the R120 3-acre zoning in their areas where they do not have public water and they don't have public sewer. And some of them even have more. I mean, some of them have, R5-acre zones. We feel pretty comfortable that this would work here, but it's a big change.
For the layman, and being that I'm still kind of new, what does 3-acre zoning actually mean?
That means that, that if you are going to subdivide land now, and lots that are already existed and subdivided are, they're grandfathered. But if you had, 10 acres and you wanted to subdivide it, with roughly 3-acre zoning, you'd end up with
Three properties.
three parcels. If you had 1-acre zoning, you'd end up with 9 parcels.
So it's nothing under 120,000 square feet can be a parcel, and that can have one single-family home on it, hypothetically.
It can have whatever is allowed for residential use in that zone on it. Now, Stu's gonna tell you there's another component to this. Because the goal isn't just to say, okay, we're gonna go to 3-acre zoning and we're gonna have we're gonna have development all over town where there's, a house on 3 acres, a house on 3 acres, a house on 3 acres. Environmentally, that's not the best idea either. So Stu's gonna talk to you a little bit about that part, but are there reaction to this, thoughts on this, the whole idea of doing this?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm curious as to the process to go from where you're at now to whether this really sees the light of day.
So it starts tonight, and this is kind of an introduction to this. Assuming that there isn't a lot of pushback from the board, probably in May, you'll see a formal proposal on this for the planning board to vote on an advisory opinion for the council. And then it would be sent to the town council. There's required advertising and there are required public hearings that the council would hold. But if the council is so pleased, then they would be able to adopt this. And that would be the standard going forward from here.
There's been some discussion in social media and some misinformation on social media about who can build houses on land that they own. And I just want to remind everybody that in every community, in any state I've ever lived in, if it's a lot of record, if it is a lot that is recorded in land evidence records in somebody's town hall that goes way back before zoning even came into existence in Tiverton or any other community, it's buildable.
It's grandfathered.
It's grandfathered in. So there's a lot of confusion about that. And if people are now pre-existing non-conforming because we've changed zoning, they also have grandfather rights. So,
as a matter of fact, it's a little hard to see, but the logical way that this might happen is that it actually, instead of being one giant R120 zone, it actually turns into 3, R120A, R120B, and R120C. For this reason, to Stu's point, this would only affect land being subdivided going forward. Anything that's already subdivided, even if it was undersized, it doesn't matter. If it's a 1-acre lot, it's already subdivided, it's buildable. But what we don't want to do when we do this is make everybody pre-existing non-conforming so that if they want to do something like add on a garage or put an addition onto their house, they have to get zoning relief, because that's not, we just don't want to do that. There's language in our zoning code now that says if your lot is pre-existing non-conforming only by dimension, meaning your house is 2 acres and you're in a 3-acre zone, and you want to add on to it, as long as you meet all the setbacks, the underlying setbacks from the zone, you don't have to go to zoning. So lots of us live in houses I live in a house that's pre-existing non-conforming. I live in a part of town that's already been made 3-acre zoning. But if you meet whatever the setbacks in the underlying zone. So the setbacks right now are slightly different in R60, R40, and R80. So if we actually create these as 3 slightly different zones, we can keep their unique setbacks. So that way, people who own houses here don't have to go to zoning for relief to put an addition on or add a garage, as long as, if they would have met the setbacks under the previous zoning and they still meet the setbacks, then they're fine.
I have another question, going back to your point, Stu, and maybe to clarify this. For those parcels that are existing, like, this is where the residential compound could come in, correct? If somebody had like a larger piece, but they weren't gonna parse it off individually, they would just wanna add a house for their kid or something, and let's say it's under, would that be kind of grandfather, or is that the gray area of this potential?
So technically now, we don't allow more than one primary residence on a property, but under the new, potentially ADU regulations that are coming, who knows what that's gonna look like from the state. You know, right now, you can have a, it's not really guest houses, I don't think you're supposed to have a kitchen, I'm not quite sure on that, you have to ask the building official. But right now, we do restrict that. But what Stu's gonna talk about in a minute is a way that you might end up with something that's a little closer to that idea.
Now, is there any chance under this where you could go with 2 undeveloped lots, contiguous lots, under the same owner would automatically merge? I think that was done with the soap lots at one time.
We have that in the.
They're trying to change that
Are
legislation
they?
to prohibit automatic mergers.
I don't think that, I don't see the town wanting to do that. Lots that are already created and are lots of record, I don't see the town wanting to tinker. I wouldn't think that that's such a great plan. I think focusing on the big undeveloped land that's there is, a better use of our time than trying to, force people to join the smaller lots that already exist.
Can we get a copy of that? I didn't see that in the packet.
Oh, this is
The
the first time it's
proposed.
been shown publicly. We actually just, Ashley's firm did the GIS work for us, and we actually just got those maps. They just.
Oh,
came
okay.
in. So, yes. I don't see a reason why, but I'm gonna make sure that they're stamped draft, because anytime you have a discussion about changing zoning, can be dramatic and worrisome for people, and they think they're gonna lose their property rights, and their property's gonna be non-conforming, and they won't be able to so, and this is a long way from being adopted yet, but it's where we're headed, and I think it's probably, it's probably long overdue before we end up in a situation where we already have neighborhoods now that don't drink their water, we don't need more of it. So, any questions? So, then I'll turn it over to Stu to talk about the other piece.
Okay. So that would be, we would now be on agenda item
2C.
C, 2C. So, conservation development. And we have a conservation development program now. We have had for some years. It's called Rural Residential Development. And it has 3 different components. There's like a rural frontage, a rural compound, and a rural residential, 3 different varieties. But our comp plan has noted that that we really need to strengthen the rural residential program and make it more like a conventional conservation development program and less like a conventional subdivision. For example, right now, conservation, rural residential is not required anywhere except in the 2 watershed protection overlay districts, nor is it required to actually set any land aside as open space, except in one of the 3. I think it's the rural frontage that has a requirement for a 50% of the buildable land get set aside. So our comprehensive plan spends a fair amount of words making the point that we need to revisit this and strengthen it. And particularly given the fact that our water bodies are virtually all impaired. The Water Resources Division of RIDEM keeps a list of all water bodies in the state that are quote-unquote impaired or severely impaired. As you probably know, both of our drinking water reservoirs, Nonquit and Stafford, are so impaired that they have a federally mandated total maximum daily loading program that attempts to reduce the amount of pollutants like phosphorus and nitrogen that enter those water bodies. And just recently, the federal government twisted RIDEM's arm to actually create or begin the process of creating a TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Loading Program for Mount Hope Bay because of coliform bacteria and other sources of pollution. We have 3 major streams in town. We have Sin and Flesh in the north, we have Borden in the south, and we have Adamsville Brook in the east. All 3 of those water bodies are impaired, as is Nanaquacket Pond. So, I don't know any other town in the state of Rhode Island who has so many impaired water bodies. And the chief culprit is non-point source runoff, stormwater runoff. And that's why we always make a big deal about cutting down the amount of pervious, like pavement and asphalt and coverage that is pervious and prevents water from infiltrating into the soil, because then when it hits a huge parking lot, it just washes off and it ends up in one of our water bodies. So one of the good things about a stricter conservation development program would be to get at this huge issue of non-point source pollution. And just recently, this board authorized money to hire a consultant, which the town administrator has now done. We have hired a consultant by the name of Hayden McDermott to do what is called an LID, a low impact development assessment of the town of Tiverton. And that will give us a lot of scientific data that will support a stricter conservation development program, stricter than the one we have now, because it will show all of the different state standards and protocols that the state is urging towns to adopt, that we could adopt as part of our conservation development program. So that process is well underway, and we should have that information before too long, and as soon as we get it, we'll share it with you all. Also, I'd like to point out that we have something called the Zoning Revision Committee that Town Council created a year or so ago. Only one of our members actually sits on it, and that's Tricia. It is looking at all aspects of zoning in Tiverton, and they have recommended a conservation development program with 8 basic criteria, features, standards, and you all have this. It's entitled Committee Consensus on Conservation Development, and it's got 8 items. You all have this in your packet. Among other things, it recommends that we make this a mandatory program, and that each conservation development set aside 50% of the buildable land as open space. So that's what we're looking at now. And we've been talking to, again, Lorraine Joubert, the NEMO program that she heads up at URI, Cooperative Extension Services. NEMO stands for Non-Point Education for Municipal Officials. And so she is the person to talk to at URI. And we've been talking to her, and we've been talking to other people, and we're developing words on paper, and we've actually run that by a legal counsel outside of the town legal councils. So that will be coming your way fairly soon. Did I forget anything?
I put that up just so people, the benefit of anybody who hasn't seen what a conservation development looks like versus a conventional subdivision.
The idea is not to restrict the number of houses that somebody can build on their land. You would still be allowed, and when somebody comes before the planning board with a rural residential development, now they give us the information on how many houses they could, the size of the subdivision that they could build under a conventional subdivision. And they're allowed to do that number under conservation development or under rural residential, as we call it now. So we're not really cutting back on the number of houses people can build on their land, but we would reconfigure those houses into more of a cluster. Sometimes this concept is called cluster development, because what you're doing is you're kind of recreating an old-fashioned New England village where the houses are closer together, and if they're configured properly and take good advantage of the topography, they're not crowded together, and they can still have nice views. But you need a little more creativity than the typical Levittown subdivisions that we've been seeing in Tiverton, where all the houses are lined up in a straight line like a bunch of soldiers in a row. So that's part of it. It just requires people to become a little more creative. But if you do it right, it can be a really nice subdivision. So, did I answer the question? Oh, you were actually putting that up.
To the point that we were talking about earlier, about sort of managing groundwater and stormwater runoff, there's nothing that's as good as managing septic leachate and stormwater runoff as wooded upland. The more trees, the more, forest land you have, the more scrub land you have, the more heavy vegetative cover that you have, the more that protects both groundwater and surface water, because, the trees will take up the nutrients, the nitrogen and the phosphorus, and you've got ample place for the kind of bacteria that grows that eats things like harmful bacteria that comes out of septic leachate. So the thing about conservation development is that it requires that, there's this open space that is left as open space. And you're not going in and having, I'm gonna have this 40-acre subdivision, and the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna chop down every single tree and, flatten the land. So you're saving that, so that goes really a long way. The more we can preserve wooded upland, the better our water quality will be, and conservation development does that. And I think, in talking about that on the zoning update committee, that this would be something that would be required everywhere, including in North Tiverton. Doesn't matter where the subdivision is, this would be the standard that everybody does conservation development. Plus, honestly, if it's done the right way, it's nice. A lot of people who come to Tiverton want to live in Tiverton because they like, the trees and some scenic vista, and they want to be here because, of the natural surroundings, and conservation development certainly helps with that.
And one of my frustrations, as you've probably noticed, is that, we spend a huge amount of time on our comp plan development, and we get all kinds of input. And the people of Tiverton really care about the scenic quality of our town, the semi-rural character, not that every part of town is rural or semi-rural, but also the historic and the waterfront features, the things that make Tiverton unique as opposed to any town USA. So we have it in our comp plan, but then when we go to enforce it, we don't have the tools to enforce it. Now, it turns out that the state does allow us to develop those tools, and other towns have done it very, very successfully. But we have not done it, and we have not paid much attention to our own comprehensive plan, but we're doing it now. So this is an opportunity, and if we don't get it done this time, we're going to lose our town. Because the development pressure is enormous, because so many of our neighboring towns have been built out.
Stu, just a question, how does does this conservation development, is this overlay the zoning, or is this just become our new guiding principle for?
It would replace the rural residential. It would simply replace the rural residential, so.
So it would be our zoning. I mean, it would be adopted as our zoning. And we are working on language to do this also for multifamily. So if we're presented with more multifamily developments, that they too would have to be developed in a conservation development model.
Is there a forecasted time when eventually saturation of building here is just gonna shut down any requests to build any further? Are we gonna have way too many houses that we can't keep up with the infrastructure, we're just shutting it all down? Like you had mentioned, other towns have already, they don't have the opportunity to build anymore.
Well,
Does that look like something that could happen here in Tiverton?
oh, yeah, and that's one reason why town council did the 6-month moratorium on any residential development more than 4 units, because we are at the point where we're running right up against capacity, infrastructure capacity, and water is a huge issue, but I think traffic is a huge issue, and I think school capacity is a huge issue, especially if they try to close one of the schools, because we have projects that have been approved or are very close to being finally approved that would add at least 500 residential units, mostly in the Sousa Road, Fish Road, Main Road neighborhood, that will have a huge impact on the infrastructure. And then it gets really expensive. If you make a mistake and it's oops, then it gets really expensive to run water lines or sewer lines or build a new school, or redesign a road. So we're at that point now.
It's harder where we're relying on groundwater and well water. We know anecdotally that the state doesn't track well data. We know anecdotally that we have neighborhoods or areas where You know, if we've got drought conditions that, you know, the wells recharge slowly, that people kind of nurse their way through those weeks and months, and, you know, they're being careful with their wells, because that's what happens. We know that sometimes, you know, development within an area of one neighborhood can cause somebody else's well, you know, not to perform anymore. We have some areas of town where the development is very dense and the water is not potable now. And, you know, those folks rely on bottled water for drinking and cooking. So we don't want that to become the norm. But it is harder to know, because there's no underground map of those fissures in the bedrock. There's no, you know, underground, this is how much you have. There've been some kind of hydrology studies done of it. They're not very accurate, and they're kind of old at this point. So we're a little bit relying on experiences in other communities that have similar conditions, who got a little further ahead of us in terms of development. And some of these other communities that have instituted things like the R120 zoning that we're, you know, considering instituting and requiring conservation development, and probably some ordinances too around, around requiring wells to produce a certain amount, you know, in a bigger development, that the wells have to go in first and they have to produce a certain amount before you get a building permit, so you don't have houses and then non-performing wells. You know, and also to be aware that, you know, DEM, under a lot of pressure, now gives out a lot of OWTS variances, which, when you have hydric soil and you have wet soil like we have, can be pretty problematic. So it's up to us to set our zoning in such a way that, you know, we preserve everybody's water quality.
So, I'm just trying to get, do we need to take a vote to advance items 2B and 2C to the town council as a next step? Like, I'm just, or is it just
we're still
discussion
looking-
here?
You need more information, and we'll keep this, we can keep this on the agenda.
I think in May, I think, we should have on our agenda this for a vote. And at that point, you'll have like the formal maps and the narrative, and you'll have the written language that goes with the conservation development.
Okay.
And like, this was just to kind of introduce the topic and say, this is what we're thinking of, and get feedback, and do people think it's a good idea, and, you know, what do you think?
Well, I just want to say thank you to the both of you, and for probably many others who have been involved in getting this. This is really important work, so thank you.
I second that.
Yes, and I'd like to thank the town council and town council president Denise Medeiros, and also the town administrator, Chris Cotta, who have been very helpful and very supportive as well. So if anybody has any further questions, we can entertain them now, but I don't see any.
I think it's a great idea, increasing the lot size to control.
I think it's an excellent idea, and this is something that happened many years ago, and we were defeated by a developer that came in, and it is,
I remember,
remember?
I remember.
And so time is of the essence.
Right. Thank you so much. So I'd like to go back now to what used to be 2A, which is a discussion of the special use permits. And I'd like to start with the memorandum that Ashley sent, because she raises some issues in this memorandum that I'd like to kind of settle right now, if we can, or at least get you to think about. The first item that she comes up with on page 1 of her memorandum, and this is the one on the Weston and Sampson letterhead,
What's the date on it, March 27th?
and the date is March 27. She says that she asks about design standards, because the person who did a lot of the work in Ashley's organization wanted to know how we felt about design standards. Should we use the design standards, I'm talking about basically architectural standards, that are in the form-based code zones, or something else? And so that got me to doing some homework to see what other communities have been doing with design standards. And I kind of came to the conclusion, and I'd like you all to think about this, we don't have to make a decision tonight, but I kind of came to the conclusion that the design standards that we have now in the form-based code booklet, I didn't bring my booklet with me because it's so huge, but it's like 150 pages of design standards that actually have graphics as well as the text. Those design standards were put together specifically for the form-based code zones particularly in North Tiverton. And I remember having a conversation with Mr. Cecil of the Cecil Group, who actually put that together. And he said he chose those design standards because they really fit Tiverton, and they really fit the lot sizes and the building sizes that we're likely to have in those areas. Well, just hold it up, because that's what I'm talking about. You've all got either that electronically or a hard copy of that. So I think that we should keep the design standards and go through and see if I'm right. Keep them for the form-based code districts. I'm talking about traditional Main Street, neighborhood business, and pedestrian-friendly destination. Those are the three. Keep them, but make them mandatory. They never got made mandatory, so I don't want to be arguing with people who want to put up metal warehouses on Main Road. I want to say, go do something better and come back when you've got a good design. So if we keep those design standards for the form-based code, what do we use outside of the form-based code where the Zoning Revision Committee, for example, is suggesting that we also have design standards for the other commercial districts that might be waterfront, that might be general commercial, for example, or highway commercial. And I looked around and went to other communities in the state of Rhode Island to see what they had. And the best one I could come up with, believe it or not, is right next door in Portsmouth. Now, they're a little old. They were put together in 2004, but they are they're terrific because they don't have any pictures, no graphics. It's all verbiage, and they address issues like building facades, exterior building design and detail, rear and side facades, fenestration, metals, exterior materials, et cetera, et cetera. So I asked Ed earlier this evening before our meeting began if he would be kind enough to make copies, either electronic, for those who prefer electronic, or hard copies of the design standards. It's about 50 pages long, and get them out to you as soon as possible. And then you can review those at your leisure before we get together again. So then we would basically have two different varieties. But the good thing about the Portsmouth design guidelines are they look at things like, they take a look at specific categories of buildings, like commercial stores, like coffee shops, like restaurants, like gasoline stations. Hopefully we won't have a lot more of those in town. And then they have specific design standards and criteria for those specific kinds of buildings that we're going to see more of in our general commercial district, in our waterfront district, in our highway commercial district. So I think they fit the bill for Tiverton as closely as I could find, and you'll be getting those, and if you can get those out as soon as you can, as soon as it's convenient for you to get them out. Don't wait until you put another packet together. So that's the first item, because that kept coming up in the draft that that we all got. That issue kept coming up. A second issue that Ashley was asking about is prohibited uses. And there are some prohibited uses in this document, in the big document that we got from Ashley last week. And they're sort of toward the end. And right now, we only have like 15 prohibited uses in the zoning code. And I wanted, and Ashley had added like 3 more to the list.
I have them on Stu now, the hookah lounge.
Oh, thank you. So Ashley had added a few more, but also I wanted to call your attention to the fact that the Zoning Revision Committee has come up with a list of 22 recommended prohibited uses. These uses would be prohibited in all districts, not in Tiverton anywhere. And this is this 2-page document, and it's not just a list of the prohibited, the recommended prohibited uses, but it also gives the definition, because we need a definition, otherwise they're not enforceable. So you've got that document, and I'll make sure that that Ashley gets it as well. So go through that document and see if there's anything you think is unreasonable that the Zoning Revision Committee has suggested as prohibited.
So maybe along those lines, do we have to reconcile whatever zoning has for prohibited uses with what we have for prohibited uses? I mean, there should be a
Yes.
single.
There has to be a single list, but we get to make that decision.
Okay.
So the Zoning Revision Committee is simply making a recommendation to the planning board.
Okay.
We don't have to, we can strike things off their list, and we can add things that are not even on their list. And I would be happy, for you to take a look, but you can start with this list. Take a look at the list that is in the existing zoning code. It's in Article 4, Section 15. And it goes all the way through, and the last one on the list is crematorium. And that gives you a hint of what's been happening in Tiverton. Something dreadful comes before the town, and then the town decides to make it a prohibited use, rather than thinking in advance of what should be prohibited. So we're always closing the barn door after the horse has escaped. So let's stop doing that, and take a good hard look at the list that Zoning Revision Committee sent over, and see if you're happy with that. And then, so we need to, that's something that we can talk about again next time we get together.
We asked, Susan, your list is different?
Yeah, he had Hope Mill and all that. I don't.
It's what was in our package this month.
Yeah, that's something that Ashley put together, and she didn't,
But I think everything that's on your list is there. This has some extra things.
Yeah, this has extra.
It has extras, okay. But as long as as long as it has extras, it's okay.
Well, you'll see stuff that we had.
Can you scroll to the bottom for a second?
What are you looking for, Sue?
Like self-service car wash or campground. Campgrounds up there.
Self-service car wash was just a no on the district use tables, I
Yeah,
thought.
that's why that's not in here.
I don't see crematorium on this list.
There's
On this
It's
one,
already-
on the board, no, but it's already listed under Article 4, Section 15.
So the reason why prohibited uses list becomes a lot more important is that the state legislation, the package of state bills that came into effect mostly January 1st, does set up sort of a convoluted process whereby a use that is not mentioned can be permitted if a case can be made that it's somewhat similar to a use that is now permitted. So we need to make sure that, that we really pay attention to what we really don't want to see in Tiverton anywhere. Otherwise, you might see it. So again, that's just something you can take a look at, and we can talk about it next time we get together. I wanted to just point out that Ashley has mentioned that there are some outstanding items that we do not now have. The big outstanding item is the fact that we turned a lot of special use permits into permitted uses, but stipulated that those permitted uses have performance standards. And Ashley's group are still working on the performance standards, so that's something we need to take up. We can't take it up tonight, we just don't have them yet. But we should have them next time we get together. They're working on them. The final thing is Ashley is asking us to have a special workshop. And I think we really need one. I hate to do it to you guys. You've been so good about attending the ones that we've already had. But she gives us a bunch of dates, and I'd like to set a date right now if we possibly can. She's given us Friday, April 12th, Saturday, April 13th, Monday, April 15th, Friday, April 26th, Monday, April 29th, Thursday, May 2nd, and Saturday, May 4th. I think our meeting is on Tuesday, May 6th, is our next regular, 7th, May 7th, our next regular monthly meeting. I will not be here for the last 3 dates that Ashley mentions, so it has to be before April 29, but I am available for any of those dates. Maybe we should start out with, I think Saturday mornings have proven to be kind of popular. Would anybody mind meeting Saturday, April 13 at 9 a.m.?
I am not here then, but that's okay.
I don't know, I think you need to be here. All of the other, that's the only Saturday. Is anybody available during the day, no, okay.
I can only be here on a Saturday.
And Chris, you probably can't either. Okay, so that means that we need to get together in the evening then. What date looks like a good date for you? So we have Friday, April 12, Monday, April 15, Friday, April 26. Those are the only 3 dates that I'm available for.
Harbor Commission, Monday to 15th, so that's not going to be me.
Okay?
I can do the 12th. I don't know if the 12th is good, Friday.
Friday the 12th? Friday the 12th is fine with me.
You really know how to live, don't you?
No, I don't. I'm no life. I'm a soccer mom.
We could do Tuesday the 16th. That's one of our special planning board days.
Sorry.
Well, she's not available. Ashley is not available. Ashley has to be here, I think.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So,
What's the date?
so it would be,
think of anywhere
it would be
else I'd rather
Friday,
do it on
April
Friday night.
12.
Next week.
Okay.
That's next week. How does the 12th sound?
At what time?
Well, we could do it, we've been meeting at 6:30 at night. We could actually push that up to 6 o'clock if that would be okay. Zoning has done that for their meetings, for some of their meetings, because people have been complaining about the lateness. But is 6 o'clock okay, or does that interfere
Friday,
with?
April 12th?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, put that down on your
Can
calendar.
we meet
This,
a little early so Todd can have a life though? Like,
no.
can anybody meet before 6? Or is that like a?
No, it's fine.
That's a drop dead for everybody?
so are you suggesting 5:30?
Well, I work from home and I don't have meetings on Friday, so I can pretty much be anywhere. I don't wanna speak for the rest, but if we wanted to start a little earlier to get out earlier, I'm fine.
You gotta touch base with Ashley.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start at 6. Ashley will be available then, I think, because she makes the, she can get over. She works out of her house anyhow. I think she can be here by 6. I wouldn't want to bet that she could be here much earlier, because she might have meetings set up. So let's try it at 6 o'clock on Friday, April 12th. Is that okay with everybody? And if we all do our homework, we can make it go quicker. So, so please read it over in advance and think about it, and make notes, because I think it can move more quickly if we do that.
Could I just ask a question about that? So in the packet, there was a Word document dated 3/27 that appeared to have draft language for these, either,
Yep.
that's what we're reviewing and providing comment on, correct?
Draft the language for what?
It
She
was,
has some specific and objective criteria.
yes, so section
Hotel,
45 criteria for specific categories of special use permits.
Yes, I was actually going to start with that, and just move through this document, because the first section of it would be, I don't know if you want to call it specific and objective criteria, or performance standards, or a combination, but she has taken different categories, and she is telling us to please, make sure that this is actually what we want.
Sure.
So why don't we do that? Why don't we take a look at this big document, and Todd will put it on the screen. Yes?
Just because this is gonna be a little bit long, I'm wondering if we should just get that cannabis thing done quick before we forget about it for the night, because we said we'd get to that today, right? Don't we have to do that one tonight?
Yeah.
We don't have to do it. 45 days we have on that.
You can do it tonight. If you don't do it tonight, it has to be done on May 7th. Has
Let's-
to be.
We
let's-
can ask for an extension.
let's do it
if we
tonight.
don't
It
have
won't
the
take-
Not gonna wait.
information.
It will,
You don't have the information, Rosemary? Is that what you said?
No, I didn't get the information until Thursday.
The town council referred it to the planning board on Monday.
The town council referred it to us, but we didn't get the information that's in the packet. I mean, in the past, we have had 45 days, but we've also asked for extensions if we don't have it. I am not up to date on cannabis.
Okay.
Okay, we'll
And I will
delay,
not vote on
we'll
it
delay this item, if that's okay. I don't think we need a resolution to do that. We control our own agenda. We will carry this agenda item over to, and since what we're doing on the April 12th is actually going to be a workshop, right? That doesn't require a quorum, we should carry this item over to our May 7, 2024, regular monthly meeting.
Can we get some backup, perhaps from Ashley?
What more
Well,
backup
what?
do you want,
Backup.
Rosemary? Tell me so I can get it for you.
We
Give
do have
us an overview.
we do have a memo.
I gave you one.
We have a
We
memo.
gave
We-
from the planning department.
Yes. So it wasn't attorney-client privileged material that way.
Yeah,
That's
here
why,
it is,
Rosemary.
Well, explain it.
Explain what more?
Can I say something here? I didn't mean to start this, but Rosemary, this is, first of all, the citizens in Tiverton voted for this, right? We had a choice about voting for cannabis, right? And the answer was yes. So the town council has basically said, okay, we're gonna have this because the citizens voted for it. Where do we want it? They've come back with the suggestion that it only be restricted to a location in the industrial park. We have to give an advisory opinion because we have to, by law, give an advisory opinion. So we could advise them and say, well, no, or we could say yes, but we don't have any other choices. It's not like we can say, we're not taking this up to discuss where else this should be or what else should it be. This is all based on a vote of the people. So to me, this seems like honestly kind of a perfunctory thing. If you don't think that the council's concept of having this located only in the industrial park is a good one, then you can vote no. But otherwise, we can vote yes, get this back to the council, and not end up with having to vote on 15 big things on May 7th, because we're already got a lot to vote on. So I don't know, I just don't see this as being that complicated, and that's just me.
Okay, and just about everything else on our agenda are items that we can, I would like to approve the minutes.
Yeah.
The minutes, I think, are important, but the rest of the agenda is not, and it's only 20 minutes past 8. So if you will indulge me and tell me, and that includes you, Todd, as well, because you're taking the minutes, or you're taking the notes on this, for Ashley, if I'm handling it right, but I'd like to start and just go through this page by page. Starting on the first page, this is a document that's dated March 27, and the first page says Article 16, Special Use Permits. And what is stricken out is what is recommended to be dropped. And then, so what you see here under sections 1, 2, and 3, these are the 3 sections on the first page are, and tell me, Todd, if I'm incorrect, but this is verbiage that comes right out of the state law. And we have no choice whatsoever here. We take it, right?
That's correct.
We have no discretion there to change any of that. It comes right out of state law. On the next page, section 4, these are the criteria that we have in our existing zoning code that we have given to the zoning board as criteria for issuing special use permits. But I noticed 2 things. I noticed the 6th item has been dropped. There are actually 6 criteria. The 6th criteria is compatibility with a comprehensive plan. That is not on this draft. I don't know if that was just a...
No, you're not allowed to have that as a criteria.
Oh, really?
General law specifically
Okay,
said that.
no, that's fine. I'm just asking the question. So
You actually approved this change.
it wasn't dropped by mistake. It was dropped because the state law says we can't, because it's an inappropriate criteria, as far as the state, I know, as far as the state is concerned. Okay, that's fine. The other thing I was wondering about is some of the criteria that we use here is not specific and objective. It is very subjective. For example, it will not create a nuisance. Well, what's a nuisance? What's a nuisance to me may not be a nuisance to Rosemary. Can't we define that? Shouldn't we say a nuisance such as noise, excessive light, dust, odor, vibration, and just list all of those things. Or it will be compatible with neighboring uses. What do we mean by that? We can put a specific, we can define that more specifically. Should that be something, would you like me to try my hand at that and bring it back to you next time we get together? Or what do you think about that, Todd?
I think actually it's keeping these here.
Uh-huh.
These are vestiges of the old, which are fine, to continue to have these broad categories, but then below that you have the specific and objective criteria. And I think what she's envisioning is having somebody that needs a special
Okay,
use
I see
permit
what
having
you're
to meet
saying.
these 5 as well as the specific ones that are subsequently listed.
Okay, so we get into the specifics later on, but we'll leave these broad. Okay, that's fine with me. So that brings us to section 45, criteria for special categories. Okay, Todd's got it up.
I'm sorry, Stu, I hate to break your rhythm here.
No. Everybody can break it anytime they want, and if you think I'm doing this wrong, tell me and we'll do it a different way.
I'm just trying to clarify what we are going to cover at this Saturday workshop versus this.
I think this is the beginning of the Friday evening workshop.
Okay. This
Yeah,
is
this is
a
just the
necessary
beginning.
precursor to enable that workshop.
It's too much to do
Yeah.
at once.
So
Okay.
if we can.
Thank you.
If we can chip away at this big document tonight, we'll have less to do with the workshop.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so if you take a look at section 45, item A is existing, item B is existing. We don't get
But-
into
but-
new stuff until
Isn't-
we get to item C.
But Ashley is asking questions. Should we answer those questions?
Yes, please.
Okay.
The first one, this double cottage on adjoining lots, she asks what that is.
Okay, I don't see that on my draft.
It's,
Highlighted.
I don't think,
In a
I
residential
don't think
district.
those with hard copies unless the comments are printed,
I don't think the comments print.
so they're not gonna see.
You might have to slide over here, Stu, because they're not, you're gonna have like a little icon on there.
Oh,
You're not gonna have the actual
see, it
question.
didn't, her comments didn't print out here.
We don't have.
Okay, but
I don't think
I'll,
have we ever
Next time.
done a double cottage?
Well, do we define a cottage, or is this just a, what is it called, a two-family home?
This has all the earmarks to be something
I'll show
that
you.
we let get built right here.
So,
On the side.
I think we should delete this, because it might be, as Tricia said, this has gotta be a artifact from something that we had to let be built someplace, because,
This is like back, this is like when they were building those cottages over at Stafford
Yeah.
Pond, and they, like,
I
So-
don't,
So we don't need this for double cottages?
have a double cottage.
I can't
Single
imagine.
family.
There's only
Unless somebody's building like something, there is a potential piece of property that like has so much water that somebody might wanna build over that, but I don't.
Studios,
Yeah.
studios.
so everybody is agreeable to simply deleting A?
But to Rosemary's point, if it's a studio, like, are we thinking like a studio apartment? Like,
This is what they've done in the past. They've come in with had a primary dwelling, and then they have a little cottage or shed turns into and you have.
Like an artist studio or something like
Yes.
that, yeah.
But that's just an accessory structure.
An artist studio is one thing. If it's a living residence, then that will probably be covered under the accessory dwelling unit statutes coming down your throat.
Coming down now,
so should
but in
we,
the past, they've just done it.
Okay.
should we
No
get-
enforcement.
should we
It's always
get rid
been a
of this, or your
problem because
concern?
of it chews up all that vegetative buffer down there on the edge of the pond. The thing started out, they bought 33 acres, and then they bunched their little fishing cottages that were used maybe 3 weeks a year. And they come up from New York. It was never intended to be changed, and then you started hearing, hey, my dog's head sticks out the front door and his tail out the back, and, I'm expected to raise 3 kids there. And then we saw once they started turning it into year-round, all of a sudden now, the things that were prohibited, petroleum products, they were bringing in gas for their gas mowers. Even though they weren't supposed to use it, weed killer for the lawns and all of that. So anything that we can do to prevent chewing up what little vegetative buffer there is.
I say it goes.
Yeah, this seems like a bygone sort of artifact. So consensus to delete.
Noted.
Okay, so that brings us to B, and Ashley has another comment, and I'm sorry, I didn't have these comments.
It's okay.
I couldn't do homework because I didn't have the comments.
We're not changing that.
Yes.
You're not allowed to by state law,
Okay,
the
that's
case
fine.
law.
Okay, so that, so B,
Stays.
and B has 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't see any issues there. So that brings us to C, which is cemetery, columbarium, or burial ground. And I don't see any comments. Ashley's not asking any.
She's striking some content.
have the
So
strikes?
we
Yeah,
have,
there's some strikes.
she is striking some things and then adding some things. And I do see a problem or two, but the only thing that jumped out at me was C7. The minimum lot size for a cemetery shall be 5 acres. We did agree to that. I remember that discussion. The minimum lot size for a columbarium shall be 2 acres. Now, a columbarium, I think that's mistaken because a columbarium is typically a very small, little enclosed area. We don't have a lot of them around here. There's one down in Little Compton at St. Andrew's Church in Compton Commons. But they're very small because they're just areas where you put ashes, urns with ashes in them, into a little niche. And so we're making it a minimum of 2 acres? That doesn't sound right.
That's too big.
Yeah.
That's way too big.
So a lot of the columbariums that I know of are attached to a church.
Yes.
I don't know if I mean, not that I've been to a lot of them, but I've never been to one that wasn't attached to a church.
It's his own primary use, you mean?
I have buried my boss in one at Arlington National Cemetery, and it was set aside, it was just.
A lot of the cemeteries are now having them.
Yeah.
And
But
in
if it's-
Europe, all of the cemeteries
But
have
if
them.
it's not at a cemetery, then is 2 acres the right, I mean, if somebody's gonna just like, okay, we're gonna open a standalone column, which could be a nice thing, is, I don't know, 2 acres doesn't seem unreasonable because, I don't know, you'd wanna, I mean, it has to have setbacks, right? Right, there's a setback here for these
Okay.
things, right?
Yes. Number
So,
3, I believe.
100 feet from the boundary line? So when you come in 100 feet, and you come in 100 feet, and you come in 100 feet, and then you have to have some parking spaces, I don't think 2 acres is that much.
Becomes a business if it's big.
Okay,
But,
that's fine, I'll go along with 2 acres.
But
I was just raising that issue. I thought it might be a typo, but you remember a discussion where we did.
We
go
talked
through
about
it.
that one Saturday morning at length,
Yes.
yeah.
just as it was just
Okay, that's
described,
fine,
yes.
That's fine.
I have a question though, like, do we, like, understanding what currently exists, do we feel like we need or want more of these in town?
We don't have any.
Isn't there, there's not a columbarium, but isn't there, a small cemetery, just because my daughter's obsessed with them, over on East Road? And,
Those are historical.
Well, those are
Historical
historic
cemeteries.
cemeteries.
Historic cemeteries.
okay, so are we saying, do we want we want new ones, is what I'm asking? Does that
That's-
make sense for the, like,
To open a new cemetery.
yeah, because like.
This is a new cemetery.
It's gonna be
not
business?
Oh, no.
Historical ones.
That's what I'm saying is does that make sense, understanding all of this discussion we just had about our ground settlement and all that? And these, when you build these, we call them mausoleums in Jersey, but they are like, they're indoor, right? So they're pretty chunky, like impervious buildings, where I just, like, I'm just throwing it out there as like, does this make sense, understanding what we just looked at from a zoning standpoint? We're gonna start putting people in the ground or above the ground with our challenges. I don't know if you've ever been to New Orleans or Key West, but sometimes stuff pops up and we get a lot of groundwater, so I'm not sure we're the place to have this, is my thought. Or what makes sense here. Like, I think the historic ones totally make sense and obviously keep them, but to add more, understanding everything we just talked about.
Yeah, I don't know if we're at a place where we put it on a prohibited use. But my question is, what if you have a cemetery that's meeting the 5 acres and you want to throw a columbarium in there?
It would be an accessory use, so it would not have to be the 2 acre.
Okay. For me, that seems like the most logical place where someone's going to augment an existing cemetery, Picassid being an example, with a columbarium to respond to perhaps a change in what the public direction for internment, like, you know.
And I think these things are gonna become more popular, and now that I think about it, if you're familiar with Notre Dame Cemetery on Stafford Road, just on the Fall River side of the Stafford Road border, it has a very large building, not a very large building, but a pretty substantial building, which is all columbarium. So that's something that we're gonna see that at Pocasset Hill Cemetery one of these days, because so many people are being cremated.
That's really not Notre Dame is really not a columbarium. Maybe part of it is now, but it used to be, you put the casket in it. I mean, those are part of, I think, a corporation or part of a church.
Well, you might be right, it might be a casket area,
Are
not
you
a
familiar
columbarium.
with what's happening? I think it's Warwick, Todd, the one that's been abandoned, and it's been on the news a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, and it was all falling apart.
They need like some kind of a document to go with it for perpetual care or something.
Well, this says a fund and organization responsible for cemetery maintenance.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. What is I don't understand, the area to be used as a cemetery will have permanent boundary markers and have a minimum size of not less than 625 square feet. Am I the only person that's confused by that, what that means?
This feels like it's a backyard situation, like, are you?
That's original language, Trish, that's what I can tell you in the ordinance right now.
Okay, well, I think 625 square feet is a little.
That's pretty small.
Well, it doesn't
A little small for a cemetery.
work
Well,
with several of the
minimum
other.
lot size is 5 acres.
Exactly,
or
that's what I'm saying, so, the permanent boundary markers I think are important, but I don't think that, the 625 square feet is.
Yeah, no, that should be stricken,
This is, and I wonder, and I'd be happy to do the digging on this, coming from a long line of funeral directors. My great-grandmother started Potter Funeral Home in Westport. I feel like a lot of this is very old, because this 625, that's a backyard, because this is burial ground, right? So when you could bury people in your backyard or in a side yard, that's what this feels like. So I feel like we need to revisit this section in like a real way. I'd be happy to like take that on, but I don't know I feel like there's some things here that are definitely artifacts of a time where we're moving, more people are getting cremated, more people are not being interned anywhere after cremation. So I just feel like this isn't reflecting the future of what happens to us when we're gone.
So I think that's fine. If you'd like to take a good hard look at this and then bring it back to us at our workshop.
Well, I think you answered the question, VA. That's specific to burial ground, which is different than a cemetery and a columbarium.
Well, we're not permitting burial grounds anymore, right?
So do we need to
Probably not.
stricken that?
There's no more burying your relatives in the backyard anymore, right?
Yeah, I think
So
we should
have to
strike that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's, like, we have to get rid of all burial ground, has to be more cemetery or columbarium.
So strike the entire number one?
Well, we have
Unless
to
you want
strike,
to add the permanent boundary markers.
Yeah, I think the permanent boundary marker.
Yeah, I think you just, the area to be used as a cemetery will have permanent boundary markers.
Okay.
and I
End of
think,
story.
yeah, we should strike burial ground from the top up there. This should just be the cemeterian, like we're not doing burial grounds anymore.
No.
Um,
Okay.
And then I would strike the burial ground from 1 and then increase the size, or,
Well, we cover the size.
oh yeah, so we
Yeah,
can strike all
further
of 1
down.
and 2.
I do have another question though. This says in 3, will not be within a commercial or residential zone, so what, we can only have new ones in the industrial zone?
We may get some use out
I
of
think
the
we're
industrial.
working our way out of not having one of these guys.
There we go. Industrial park. This would be Rhode Island's largest columbarium in the industrial park.
Right
Maybe you
next to
can't
Lum.
bury it because of all the ledge.
I'm not sure,
For all the rock ledge, it becomes a columbarium, no matter what you put in there.
I mean,
The
commercial,
paragraph has.
commercial
burial
zone,
ground.
but I mean,
I don't think we have a commercial zone that where.
But that's wrong.
what's wrong?
Well, not, it doesn't match up with the district use table that we've put together,
Okay.
where you said special use for R60 and R80 and prohibited everywhere else.
Okay.
So the language here needs to be updated and reflect what we
Yeah.
walked through.
So, so that language needs to reflect that there are zones where it was really permitted. And Todd, if you're a church and you're not in one of those zones, but you're a church and you wanted to have a columbarium,
I think it'd be accessory.
it would be an accessory even
I
if
would
you
think
weren't
so.
in that zone?
Yeah. If it's not in that zone. Well, then it's unlikely the church is in the zone too.
Say it again?
It's unlikely the church is in a zone that a church is permitted in. So it'd be a pre-existing non-conforming use is what I'm thinking, right? So as the church has a pre-existing non-conforming use, can also have accessory uses, right?
Yeah, an accessory that's, okay. I just wanted to make sure that if one of the churches really did want to have a small columbarium, that they could have it, even if they weren't in R60 or R80.
Okay, so you want to,
Which is not going to be R60.
not be within.
Okay, so, VA, you're still gonna take a look and
I'll
make
still
any
take a look.
further recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to small d, and D has all been crossed out, I believe, because the state has preempted towns from doing anything with respect to septic systems that is inconsistent with RIDEM. So, did I get that right, Todd?
Yes.
So that goes away because we have no authority in that area. That brings us to E, small e, and this has to do with considering an application for a special use permit for relief of the merger requirements for substandard lots of record. That stays the same? That can stay the same
You
without
can,
any problem?
well, you need objective criteria for that.
Okay.
Let's do look at Ashley's comment up
Oh, yeah.
What?
Goes to 4.
Why would we,
When was the last time we actually enforced this? Ever?
I think the merger was done between the assessor and the administrative offices.
Well, a merger is an administrative subdivision, so it can be done by the AO
Right,
on
but it
his or
didn't
her
go into-
own.
Did
But why would we even consider allowing somebody not to do a merger of substandard lots of record? Because it is our policy to get rid of substandard lots and
In the
make
same
everybody.
ownership. That's where it hasn't happened. In this, it has to be within the same ownership.
So explain, what does that mean, Rosemary? Like, wouldn't it be that automatically, or?
No, not automatically, because in the past, what somebody has given or deeded lots, they put one in the wife's name, one in the husband's name, and so they couldn't be merged. They have to be within the same ownership, then they would be merged.
Right, but,
Yeah.
I'm just saying this, we don't enforce it very often, and there's language in there now that says, however, any lot which is lawfully existing at the time of the zoning map amendments dated June 4th, 2001, which is made non-conforming by virtue of said map amendment, shall become a lawful non-conforming lot of record, and shall not be subject to the merger requirement of paragraph A above. So, essentially, this now only applies to a lot that was created.
Before.
No, a lot that was created after 2001 that was substandard, which I'm not sure how we
How
would
did
have
that happen?
created substandard lots after 2001.
The same way you did before 2001, after zoning was adopted. It happens. It shouldn't happen.
They did it by deed. In the past, they tried to avoid the subdivision with the Enabling Act.
I think you just delete this.
Yeah, let's just delete it. Does everybody agree with that?
That's E?
First of all, you also have to understand, general laws now don't automatically merge, what's the language? Lots that are within 50% of neighboring lots. I'm sorry, I don't know the language offhand. Right down here. The ordinance shall specify.
C?
If somebody applies to do this, why would we, I guess I'm missing the point. I lost the plot on this one, guys. I don't know why it would be a problem if they wanted to merge two.
This is to provide relief from the merger requirements. At one point,
Oh.
all substandard lots would merge if they were in common ownership, right? So somebody could come in and say, I don't want my two substandard lots to merge, and I meet the special use criteria, or whatever it is.
But didn't we just earlier say that that's not a thing anymore, that the forcing of two substandard lots? Didn't we say that wasn't a thing?
It's much more difficult now because of changes in the general laws.
So would the Rhode Island general laws just supersede and just,
General laws supersede.
yeah, so
Period.
it sounds like we could delete this because we have the cover from the general law.
Yeah, so we can just get rid of it.
Oh, yeah, actually, I have a bunch of notes here saying I don't think you have authority to do this anymore.
So F has to do with, small f, has to do with signage. And this is existing language and it has, three, 1, 2, and 3 under it. The only thing I saw there was, again, it has very subjective language. It says, it will result in a clear visual improvement. Well, what does that mean? That's, what is a visual improvement to me may not be a visual improvement to Ed. So do we need to define that more specifically? Because this is the specific and subjective language that we're dealing with.
But do you see Ashley's note?
Yeah, does Ashley's question sort of supersede?
Right, I believe she's right. Article 12. Now let's look at the sign regulations.
what, the sign regulations? Our sign regulations, for some reason, it's not a dimensional variance from signs, it's a special use permit.
Is it in this
Yeah.
regulation, though, Trish?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It shouldn't be, but it is.
It is, it's not a dimensional variance, it's a special use permit.
Yeah, and that, and yes, exactly.
Well, you have to decide, do you want signs to be governed by a special use permit or by dimensional variances?
What's going on with seasons?
It's a special use permit
Right.
that they're asking for.
Right.
That won't change their
I
application.
understand that
Okay.
won't change the application, but what's being talked about in terms of, what are they looking at in terms of granting that special
The
use permit?
vested, right.
What gives us the most control?
Which is the hardest to get?
You know, I tend to think it should be a special use permit. And I say that because it's, when people want relief from the sign ordinance, it's generally because they want something big and that it flashes and it's electronic. You know, I mean, because the rest of the sign ordinance is not all that strict.
Yeah.
It's, when people want relief from it, it's because we don't allow by right, you know, flashing internally illuminated signs. And that's almost always when somebody wants a special use permit.
You want to keep the character of the town, the rural residential.
Yeah, and I think the sign ordinance, it makes it clear that the strong preference here would be not to have those things, that, you know, people would prefer more traditional signs that were lighted with a downlight or whatever, and so.
So the net there is to keep any relief only via a special use permit, right? To bring it through the more stringent process that we can define the standards for.
I'm sorry, Trish, that seems so backwards to me. Why don't we just fix the sign ordinance to prohibit flashing signs?
We have.
We do.
Okay, so then what's the
Animated
concern?
signs are prohibited.
We do, but people, but the ordinance says that relief from any part of this ordinance, right? So, the problem with the language is that, you know, there's this big, long sign ordinance that covers everything. You can't have flashing signs, you
Right.
can't have, but the language for special use permit says, petition for relief from the requirements of this article, maybe, so anything in there, according to this, you can apply for relief from, for anything.
Right,
via
but
a
my
special
point is then get rid of the special use permit, have it as a dimensional variance, then you're only talking about size. Not about whether you can give somebody an exception for a flashing light.
See that argument?
We'd have to go through the sign ordinance. I mean, we are supposed to, it's on the list. It's kind of far down the list, but it's there to go through it, so.
So you're saying if you eliminate the special use permit, go to a variance, then you can basically say these are prohibited, and then you're only talking about the size.
The ordinance already says those things are prohibited.
So then there's no, they can't.
So the only debatable
Is
variable
size.
is size.
Size of the sign.
Size, location, I guess that's
So let me
governed
ask,
too.
let me just play devil's advocate, and let me just ask, right? And not that I love internally.
I'm just trying to figure this out. Go
I
ahead.
know, right? But, so, take for example, the industrial park, right? So Jim Long has got his Longplex sign out there. My guess is that once the, storage building goes up, you know, they're gonna have an internally illuminated sign along the building, because they
Yeah.
want the advertising.
have one up, I drove past it.
Bally's, or whoever now, whatever the hedge fund is that now
Yeah.
owns the casino up there, you know, has an illuminated sign along the thing. I mean, there are probably some rare occasions, right, where, you know, somebody's really gonna fuss about an illuminated sign. And if you have it only as a dimensional variance, then what is their option, or where do they go with this to be able to get the sign that they want? Anywhere for relief? None?
Potentially a use variance, because you're talking about a type of a,
Right. Okay, a use variance, which is a pretty high standard.
no other beneficial use, right?
Right.
Or does the sign ordinance have to be updated in a way that reflects the uniqueness of zone X over
Right.
zone Y?
That would be better.
Like, so in the sign ordinance, you're like, you're enabling that sort of signage in the industrial park, but not in general commercial or whatever.
That's why I suggest we update this instead of having a special use permit.
I mean, you are gonna tackle it, right?
Yeah, and signage is in our zoning, so we will get to it eventually.
Yeah. So maybe
we should,
so maybe this one just gets tabled and we go through it
Yeah.
and then figure out if it really is a special use permit or if it's dimensional variance. And we rewrite the sign ordinance.
yeah, so Article 9 or something like that in zoning, so
Yeah.
fix it there, and then we might decide that we don't need any special use permits or any variances,
Okay.
or have a better fix on what we do need. Okay, let's do that. So that brings us to, G, which is motel or hotel. And this is all new language. So does this new language pretty much reflect what we discussed and what we're comfortable with?
Yes and no.
Tell me the no.
I think that, remember, when the zoning ordinance committee was discussing this, the only zones that they've discussed this for are the waterfront. And so therefore, nobody's really discussed this size-wise in something like general commercial or someplace else. So maybe it's okay. I mean, just by ballpark, 20,000 square feet is about, footprint is about the size of the CVS building. And you can have multiple floors, but that's pretty much the size limit. So,
So if people are familiar with the Bristol Harbor Inn on Thames Street in Bristol, that has a very small footprint of less than 20,000 square feet, but it's like 3 stories. And I think it has 35 rooms in it. That's, you know, I don't think we will be building anything bigger than that in the town of Tiverton. And when we do have a building like that, you know, the waterfront would be would be probably the most logical place to put a building like that. It would probably have a restaurant associated with it. So I think, to me, that looks good. Everything looks good, even though it was, you know, even though most of the discussion was focusing on the waterfront, I still think that everything here, 1 through 6. Does anybody have any comments on G, motel or hotel, 1 through 6? Or we're pretty comfortable with that?
yeah,
We
and
can
actually,
always revisit these things.
we got rid of motel, we just called it a hotel or inn.
Yeah, I don't like the term motel. It conjures up images of the 1960s and 70s and really trashy buildings.
I have one question though for Todd. On on 4, Roman numeral 3, off-street parking spaces for at least 20% of the number of rooms. That's fine. If they had a restaurant, though, the restaurant would be separate, right? So that would also come into the parking calculation.
It should.
Do we need to have any?
I think that's gonna be
language?
part of the bigger parking ordinance that's being fixed.
Okay.
Because we do have mixed uses, and John doesn't know how to address those,
Okay.
like the 331 Main Road.
Yep.
Parking is a real bad situation in the town, whether it's commercial or whether it's residential. I mean, we really have a problem with it.
So are we ready to go on to H, which is convalescent, rest, nursing home, retirement residence, assisted living, or continuing care facility? This was discussed at some length at the zoning revision committee. This is all new language in it, H, and it goes from 1 to 5. I didn't have any comments. Again, we're using the 20,000 square foot is a pretty standard footprint for public buildings. And again, there's no limit on the number of floors.
I think we gotta go back to our notes on this one, because in the use table that goes with this, those things are no's everywhere. They're
Everywhere?
not. They're not supposed to be, but they're, on this use table, they're no's everywhere.
On the one,
On
on the
page
one
14.
that's this, yeah. But they're not.
Yeah, that was a, well, I had,
I don't have my zoning update committee notes with me, but I know that they're not, those aren't no's everywhere.
right.
Why do we stipulate in a non-residential district, the structure shall be designed with a lobby entrance along the primary frontage? Would you always want that, wherever it was?
Oh, yeah, and she sent a backup on that one.
Number 5,
Are you suggesting we remove that, number 5, just remove it?
well, I'm just saying, seems like it would make as much sense to have that lobby entrance along the street that it's located on, if it's in a residential district. Because it only pertains to located in a non-residential district. I'm not sure what the rationale was.
I find it interesting that that's the one design feature that is called out here. You
Design
know
it
what I mean?
any way you want it. Well, it's got the lobby on the.
Yeah, like, I don't know, that just,
I just remove it, I just get rid of 5.
I mean, we would solve for
Because
this
that's a-
through,
That's a design standard,
But the sheets and
it doesn't belong here.
I wonder if
yeah.
So 5 is gone.
5 is
It's
gone.
gone. We're,
That's
Yeah.
just so that we're all on the same page here,
We're going to revisit it. 'Cause I don't remember.
I think we have all agreed to get rid of number 5, which is really a design feature, it doesn't belong here.
And this is in convalescent, sorry, we're having a side.
Yeah, H5.
I have a, sorry, not to backtrack, but on hotel and inn, we had a building height limit of 35 feet. We don't have that for the nursing home. One, I feel like we should, I know, like should have some sort of height limit.
So in terms of that, but height would be, why would we call out height here, height there, but not there? We have a standard height limit in town that blankets everything, so why would we have to call out specific notes about height in this
And
document?
that limit is 35 feet.
35 feet, yeah,
But
pretty much
it's
everywhere.
in the hotel and inn, and it's not in the convalescent, so if it's a blanket, do we?
Do we even need to mention it?
But isn't that
Exactly.
isn't that because if it's a specific criteria in the special use permit, you can't get a,
That's my opinion, yes.
right, so in something that you wouldn't want somebody to ask permission to go higher, if you put it in there, then they can't ask for permission to go higher.
Okay,
Okay, so I would add it to.
so I would
any
add it.
building.
I would add it, because this is all special use.
Well,
You had a thought,
well, I think you gotta think about it, I mean, there might be some things where you would wanna let somebody go 5 feet higher, or whatever, you know, I mean, but, but I think,
Well-
I think the idea here was that nobody wants a 5-story hotel, right? They don't want more than
Yeah,
3-story hotels.
and 35 feet would allow 3 stories.
Right,
I don't think we need more than 3 stories for anything anywhere in the town of Tiverton. I can't think of an exception to that. I think that.
I mean, how high does a ladder truck go?
That's as high as it goes, that's why we have that limit.
Yeah.
I personally don't want people in a nursing home who are non-ambulatory on 5 floors and there's not a ladder up there to get them.
So let's.
You see a lot of it now, like 3 Rod Way. There was a lot of instances where somebody wanted to build in front of somebody else and go up 35 feet or so, completely blocked their view of the water. People that had a nice view.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, okay.
tell me where you had, because I don't have it, what did you have for where these were permitted in the last version, the version?
The March 5th, I had them permitted in all the residential.
Is special use permits?
Yep, 30, 40, 60, 80.
No, 80 was a no.
Not 80, because 80 doesn't have any public water and public sewer.
Is that what it was? In this one, I did have that as an S, but this is, again, an older version. And then no in the one next that, and then special use, everything else was no.
So a programming note for our workshop, can we just make sure that we have the absolute latest, greatest version of the use table?
Well, I
For
think this
reference.
is supposed to be,
Intended to
but
be.
I'm just not sure why,
Yeah.
when I look in the use table, these things are no's, I'm not sure what happened there.
But you guys might have had another zoning conversation after ours, and I'm sure that they weren't all those, but there might have.
Yeah, ours weren't all no's, so. I'm gonna check with Susan, she has the best notes of anybody.
Hold on, let me check.
Okay, so we're still, I think, at H, the convalescent rest, nursing home, et cetera. And I think we all agreed to add, to get rid of 5, but the new 5 would be the height limit of 35 feet, to make it consistent. And so, Thomas, we've got that, then we can go on to I, which is, and I'm gonna ask Tricia to address this, commercial raising of crops or agriculture, because in I-1, it says, all commercial raising of crops shall be conducted indoors.
Yeah, I
Do
don't
do
get
you really mean to say that?
I didn't write this.
No, but you are our expert when it
No,
comes to.
but I didn't write these
Critters.
Okay.
That's gotta be a mistake.
Yeah, I don't understand this, I don't understand 1 at all. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
So should we just delete number 1 altogether?
I think so.
Because it doesn't make any sense.
I'm going to interject for 1 second. I'm
Seems
gonna
like number 2 would prohibit the marijuana one that we're talking about.
That's exactly where I was going next, Dick. I was going to say that we,
Says herbs and,
Good.
that
it's all- yeah.
I be excluding
well, that's fine with
cannabis.
me, but.
I think they should leave that
Because you
one
have
in.
Me too.
Council has other criteria for cannabis.
Right, so how do we handle it?
Commercial rights crops, including such greenhouse, Just, but excluding or
But excluding
excluding,
cannabis.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
but excluding.
It's an approved
I
solar
think we lost on that one.
We'll word it better than that.
Yeah, but won't cannabis have its own thing?
That's why I'm saying excluding cannabis from I here.
Right, okay.
You have to make that note in there, if it had its own section.
Yeah. What?
Would you have to exclude it from there?
From I.
Yeah, even if it had its own section.
Oh. It's just cleaner.
Is everybody,
So number one,
I don't understand what that's trying to say.
delete number one altogether in its entirety? Now, does anybody have any comments on any of the other items that are listed? I think it reflects, I know some of the measurements may be a bit arbitrary. And we're trying to make measurements as consistent as possible, but I didn't see any problems with any of the rest of it.
Well, what I don't understand though, commercial raising of crops now is a permitted use. There isn't any place where it's a special use.
So why is it in here?
Industrial and open space.
Well, it's not allowed there, but okay. But, I mean, it's a permitted use.
it's probably intended as performance standards is my thought. If it's permitted everywhere, that's,
Yeah, it's not a special use.
Permitted with these performance standards.
So,
I have it not permitted in waterfront, and special use in
okay, well, no, I know, I mean, there are some places it's not, but there's no place that it's a special use permit. So I'm confused.
This wouldn't be construed as a set of performance performance
Not if
standards.
permitted uses don't have, well, they have performance standards, but are we, these weren't S's before.
The industrial and open space are. And that's where she got the solar thing, because I do have a note on industrial, it says indoor framing or under solar. Indoor farming or under solar. That's where she got that from, was an industrial. With a conservation land plan.
This isn't much. 20 feet isn't much from a residential. 20 feet's not much.
I think we need to ask about this, because I'm a little flummoxed here.
So maybe we table this one for the workshop.
tabled.
Yep.
Okay.
The whole thing.
All about.
Yes, Dick, you have a question?
No, with the whole, we're tabling the whole,
I,
Yeah, okay.
all of I, is that what we're saying?
yeah.
Until the workshop.
Yeah.
Okay, it's now about 20 past 9. Would you like to do a little bit more of this and then just approve the minutes? Well,
Sure.
Come on.
Let's see if we can do, we just tabled I, agriculture. J is nonprofit clubs, lodges, community centers. And we,
I think we have to add the height requirement into that one of building height of 35
yes,
feet as well.
yes, add 35 feet height. That's a good catch. Did Ashley have any comments on this one?
No.
No, but I'm gonna
No,
make
that's
a
fine.
note that when we brought this
That's
up,
fine.
that the language here, we've had people try and argue in the past that nonprofit only relates to organization club and not to the other things that are listed. And that's not the intent. So however that needs to be stated, that all those things are non-profits.
Oh, so a nonprofit organization, a nonprofit club, a nonprofit lodge? That's what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if the way to list that is just to list them and then put nonprofit.
Of a nonprofit nature.
Parentheses
or whatever.
afterwards or something, but we can avoid that argument again. Two, the hours of operation between 7 and 10. I don't, like, how late does the VFW open?
In the morning?
They're closed,
No,
of the
at night.
VFW.
They,
At night, how open?
is it 1, 2 o'clock in the morning
I
sometimes?
think they're open.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of these, like, I think the VFW is open late. They have a liquor license.
Right.
Yeah, they are.
1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, so the hours of operation here say between 7 and 10. I'm not sure that we can,
Can you limit
wanna
it?
do that.
Because
some of these things are, you know,
grandfather.
maybe 2 AM.
I mean, my general observation were hours of operation were a little across many of these. Like I had my own questions on some of them, like they seemed off.
The licensing board, yeah.
VFW varies, 11, 12 a.m. also. They close 12 a.m. on the weekends.
Yeah, and when the Knights of Columbus was here, they were open late too, like, some of these are, you know, I'm not sure that we should have hours of operation for this.
Yeah,
It's a licensing issue.
And couldn't we make hours of operation one of the universal provisions that would apply to everybody?
I don't know if you could do that blanket. Like, I think it depends on the intended use.
I think you're right. It
Yeah.
depends on
The
the use.
license.
I do have a note on this that we did add the size and the hours to this particular special use for this topic. So we did.
You had a lot of
talk about
conversation because it's in a
hours.
residential zone, you wanted to limit the hours. Or it's permitted there.
Because all the special uses are in residential zones.
But I think it's still a licensing issue, to your point.
Right.
So do we go back and change the zoning?
Why do we prohibit commercial kitchens? If they were lucky enough to have one,
Well, yeah.
they're
this is-
already limited to
Stick
only members and their
hours.
guests.
This is, I think this is overkill for the problem. And the issue is that, the lodges, whatever you wanna call them, that have commercial kitchens, or have a kitchen, and have a restaurant essentially, and have a liquor license, right? They operate like the way a restaurant does. And they are in fact allowed to have events there. I mean, we've always allowed that as an accessory thing, right? So if they want to have a benefit for the fire department, whatever they can have. The issue is, in this day and age, with somebody else who has a building that they want to rent for events on a regular basis as a money-making thing. We don't want to have these popping up all over the place because they are, unlike the VFW or whatever, where their primary business is to be a lodge and a meeting place for the members, and they occasionally have events. These sort of other places that are really, all they are event places, and it's, you know, noise and traffic and the neighbors and everything else. So, I mean,
But those are for profit, right? Because we're saying these are nonprofit.
well, yeah, although there are people who try and skirt that. And I think, and I also think that they're trying to get away from the, how do I put it, you know, I have I have a barn, and now it's gonna be a wedding event rental center, right? And like the neighbors are gonna have, you know, weddings every weekend that they're gonna have to listen to. So I think if you have a kitchen, then you're allowed to have the same accessory uses that a restaurant would have, right? And a restaurant can have you can have a private party, you can't tell a restaurant they can't have a private party, right?
Correct.
I don't see how you can tell a lodge that has a commercial kitchen and a liquor license that we've given to them, you can't have a private party there. That seems like overkill. Or that they can't rent it out to, you know, other people.
VFW has that on their sign, all rental.
Right.
Well, I mean, could you make number 6 here, leasing of the lodge meeting hall to third parties is prohibited unless,
Yeah, but what if they need to do fundraising? They would need a commercial kitchen to stay within the law if they're serving food and cooking there. That was always a thorn in my side at the senior center.
Yeah, and Little Bear used to do that.
Right.
The Rod and Gun Club, too.
He had a money raiser for the Historical Society.
Right.
so what are, sorry, I'm losing track of what the sticking points are here. Trying to bring it back. So
Commercial kitchen.
we have commercial kitchen, but that seems, I mean,
Understand why you can't have one.
Does this go back to the special use in the residential area though? Like, to that point, I would think,
Use that for historical society.
I think this one needs to go back to the drawing board, because it, like, no, one of these things is, you know, no alcohol is permitted. Well, we give them liquor licenses. Like, this
It
is-
seems like every one of them is a sticking point when you look at each and every bullet.
Yeah, I
Sure,
think that,
except for the sleeping quarters.
I think this
There
is,
seems to be the only one that should be applied here, you know?
I think that we should go back to the drawing board on this one. I think this is more one of, if it's in a residential zone, that it needs to be set, you know, it needs X amount of setback from, you know, neighboring properties that, you know, that the, so that, you know, people leaving at 2 o'clock in the morning aren't, you know, waking up the neighbors. And then we probably need to have something on the not permitted use about, you know, so that people don't say, well, I have a barn and I'm in a commercial zone and I'm gonna make it a rental hall. You know, I'm gonna make my building a rental building, is what we probably should do.
Unless you had a mobile farm stand, in which case it'd be parked inside of your structure, inside of your barn. If it wasn't during the season that you're selling
There you go.
something.
But that wouldn't fit in with the nonprofit portion.
No, it would,
or to that point, does it have to be an established nonprofit to fight the people who are trying to, like?
no, this is another one that I think needs to get, we need to think about this, because it's,
Even the outside music too, because if you're doing a fundraiser, you should just follow the town ordinance for that as well.
right.
If you're having horseshoes or whatever at your Knights of Columbus or whatever for a fundraiser, you got music playing outside, you don't want to prohibit that, you know.
Right. And the outdoor music is already covered all in our regular ordinances anyways.
all right, so we'll come back to this one on the 12th.
Okay. Okay, so that brings us to K, child or adult daycare center. Does anybody see anything there that gives them pause?
Well, my only thought is if we're thinking about this in residential, 5 AM is a little early usually you can't really drop off before 7 AM. Yeah.
Isn't that dictated?
See, I happen to
by the
work in
owner?
an industry though, that people go to work at 4 and 5 in the morning and they're always dropping their children off, unfortunately. At 3:30 in the morning, they gotta bring their kids out of bed, so.
Isn't it
To,
dictated by
to
the
an
owner?
actual daycare?
Isn't that?
To an
dictated-
actual daycare, yeah.
There's one that exists, oh wow.
Up north, yeah, with like Central Falls, what have you. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
really? Look, I gotta make all my flights after 6 for my kids, I'm like.
Some of them cater to like second shift,
Oh, okay.
like healthcare
Mhm.
workers.
That makes sense.
Right.
I don't know about locally, but, you know, in other areas, cities often.
5's not unreasonable, I don't think.
Well, I was just thinking, like, granted, I'm up early, I'm neighbor farm, so by 5 AM, it's moving and shaking, but I don't know if it's moving and shaking for everybody else, since I have no life, as Todd kindly pointed out. See, I gotta get up early.
Wow. So you're good with childcare?
Yeah.
So childcare would require special use permits in all of the 4 residential districts. So that brings us to, maybe what we should do is just try to do 2 more of these and then go on to minutes. So private school, pre-K through 12.
I had a question about the hours of, this is one where I questioned the hours of operation because
Yeah.
like, schools are gonna have concerts, theater, sporting events, whatever, like, you can't shut it down at 6 PM. So I would argue either 9 or 10 at night,
Okay, let's do
based on
10.
experience.
I would say 10, because they have dances sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, say 10.
There's some design standards and other stuff that we probably have to discuss, I think.
Well, we've got the design standards for schools in the Portsmouth Design
Okay,
Standards
so we'll pick
document.
those up.
So I think you could probably just use those. Anything else here? So the only thing we're changing is we're extending the hours of operation to 10 PM. Everybody
There
happy?
is a question here, I don't know who Joanna Nato is, but it says the site, yeah, will we develop landscaping requirements that can be referenced?
Yeah. They are going to develop those, and we'll hopefully have those for the next workshop.
Oh, okay, great.
So those landscaping requirements will be universal, they'll apply to everybody, everything. Okay, I think we're ready to go on to AM, university, college, or junior college.
If we're making the private school K through 12, 10 o'clock, we need to make the university college or junior college at least 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Can we really put hours of operation in the zoning code?
They
Should
do with
we-
special use permits, they'll
should we-
limit things.
Should we even mention hours of operation for a university college or junior college?
It seems like there could be so many things going on
Yeah.
that, I mean, we're just gonna open ourselves
I
up.
pulled all-nighters all the time at the computer center, so.
It was like for those 4 years, yeah.
So delete it?
Back in the day when we did have computers.
Yeah, right.
We're deleting the hours requirement?
I'd just get rid of them.
I would, yeah, I would.
I think anything outside that would fall under noise ordinance and stuff like that, so.
Dick? Okay.
And again, the design standards we can take from Portsmouth. When you get that document, you'll see that they have specific design standards for colleges and universities.
I'm gonna say, I don't know if a state license is required to have a university college or junior college, but that was number 1 on the list.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I know we have,
Would that be more like for food service, like that level of licensing?
I don't think that's what was intended, but that's a
I
good
don't know,
thought.
that's the only thing that sort of comes to mind, like, you know.
Yeah, I don't think there is, because there, accreditation is really, really, really
Right.
important. But that's a private sector issue. The government doesn't get involved in accreditation. So accreditation, I think we should get rid of number one. I don't think there's any
This
licensing.
seems to be like a cut and paste maybe
They
from
might
the
need state
previous.
license for some of the buildings that you have on campus. But that would be separate from.
That would be separate, that's,
Yeah, it looks like it's a carryover, that's all.
You know,
it's
if you want to-
about.
yeah, I'd get rid of one.
Done.
So we're getting rid of 1 and 3.
Yes.
Okay,
on,
does
stick with the
everybody feel
schools.
like going on to minutes now, or would you like to keep doing
You
this?
just wanna do N and get rid of all the schools? Just do N and get rid of all the schools and come
Okay.
back for the municipal stuff on
Let's,
Friday.
okay, let's do N and get rid of all of the schools, private, trade, or professional school. And this has 7.
Do we want to get rid of the hours on this? or-
Yeah. Get rid of the hours. Again, the design standards are something we can borrow from Portsmouth. Anything else in there?
I don't know why this one is requiring a noise management plan and that the other ones don't have.
Because the
Because
trade
it's a
school
trade
might have.
Yeah,
That's my guess.
We had a discussion,
Trade school.
I remember a discussion about the noise.
Yeah, and hazard waste materials are working on cars or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were thinking about New England Tech and what goes on there. Okay, that brings us down to municipal or government buildings, but we're gonna stop. We're gonna stop here. And I think we're, I think everything is looking pretty good here. Okay?
Only 29 more pages to go.
District use table.
The
Well-
use table we already did, so we actually might bang this out. Is it just the rest of this? And these use tables are the ones we've already done, right?
Yes, but we need to
Yeah.
check them
Double
apparently.
check them from the last, so that's.
So again, if everybody would please go through these, including the ones that we tabled, and the ones that we never got to tonight. When we get back together, we can make more progress if everybody has read it over a couple of times, and then just make notes. And then, we won't just be taking this stuff up cold. So, okay. So I'm going to call an end to that agenda item and move on to the approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve, March 5 and March 16. So we'll start with March 5. Does anybody have any corrections for March 5 minutes? Janice? Rosemary?
I wasn't there. Oh, March 5, yeah, I was there.
March 5.
16.
Janice was missing, was gone.
No?
Okay, did you have anything?
No.
Okay, so I would make a motion to approve the March 5, 2024 minutes as presented to the board without any further corrections. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Dick. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor? Good. And Janice couldn't vote because she wasn't there, so that brings us to the minutes for March 16. So again, does anybody have any corrections that they found? Okay.
Move to approve.
So Dick is making a motion to approve as is, and I will second that motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, those in favor? Okay,
Wasn't there.
so again, we've approved those minutes without any corrections. They're not needed. Okay, then I think we're ready to adjourn. You want to make a privileged motion to adjourn?